Welcome everyone to the April 14th Select Board meeting. It is 6:37. Thank you to the members of the public for your patience as we start our meeting slightly late. We had a special meeting scheduled right before this, and so we are moving Zoom rooms effectively. Okay, so yes, so it's April 14th, 6:37, the start of our regularly scheduled board meeting in a week that feels like a month. My name is Roger Arnold. I find that due to the state of emergency declared by Governor Scott and pursuant to Act 92 and the temporary amendments to the open meeting law, that this body is authorized to meet remotely. I can confirm that there is no real location to listen contemporaneously, but all members of the public are able to have access to this meeting via Zoom, and they're able to participate by raising their hands on the Zoom platform below. If they are participating by phone, they could press *9, and you will be asked to unmute yourself by *6. I can also confirm that an access number has been provided for those who have any difficulty in getting in the meeting. I see that people are using that right now. And yes, that is it. We're joined by Marcia Calloway, Mary Layton, Claudette Berchou, Rob Gear, Herb Durfee, our town manager, is here, Miranda Bergmeyer, and members of the public. Okay, so thank you. So the first order of business is the approval of the agenda. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the agenda.
Excellent. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded, made by Mary, seconded by Rob. All in favor? Okay, seeing all hands, all in favor. Great. The next item on the agenda is public comment for items not on the agenda. Is that right? I'm pulling up my agenda. Some of you are looking at me like it's not right. No, it's right. Great. Thank you. So Stuart Richards, please go ahead.
Stuart Richards, 82 Elm Street. I wanted to spend just a minute or two talking about the open meeting law. I think that may have been, although I don't know, that may have been the topic of conversation for the meeting that preceded this. And I was going to suggest again that the select board seriously consider having a conversation with or having a dialogue with Chris Kentucky, who has sued the town over violations, alleged violations of the open meeting law. It seems to me that he's held out a hand and that hand has not been responded to. I don't quite understand why the town is so bent on its way to wanting to spend money on a needless suit when it would be very easy to comply with the open meeting law. So that's really the gist of what I'd like to have in the record so that it is there in the minutes. And Miranda, I really appreciate your taking the minutes, and I've noticed in the past that you have reflected what people have said in your minutes. So have a great night. Thanks very much.
Great, thank you for your public comment. Are there any other public comments for items not on the agenda? Go ahead, Linda Cook. You please press *6. And name and locatable address. The former chair would remind me of that, I'm sure. So name and locatable address, please, as you make your
147 River Road. I've got the question I asked last meeting. I've made suggestions for corrections to the minutes and wondering if that's in the consent agenda, if it would be pulled out, or are they automatically approved when passed?
I will answer this administrative question. So yes, when they're part of the consent agenda and we move the consent agenda, the implied action is that the corrections will be made unless they are specifically pulled out. That is my understanding.
Okay, well then can you read what I've made for suggestions? I don't have that in front of me since I just got into the meeting. And so that it's on, I'd like people to hear what I asked to be corrected.
This is public comment, so it's an opportunity for you to make comments, not for us to necessarily read the consent agenda. I say respectfully.
Well, I can't 100% quote what was said. One of it was correction to what I said as far as the cameras. It was, I wanted deleted the part about the fire department. That is nothing I said. I said it was related to a case. It was number 2 and number 6. 6 was cameras. What is number 2? I don't know. Well, I hope it will be considered as a correction to the minutes with what I've added to the agenda, added to the consent part, please.
Okay, thank you.
On page 46 of the documents.
That's right. It's part of our consent agenda.
Yeah.
Any other public comments for items not on the agenda? Go ahead, Cheryl Lindberg. You may unmute yourself. I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Cheryl Lindberg, 59 Koch Road. I apologize that my computer rebooted and I couldn't get in earlier to the meeting myself. I just wanted to ask about the item 10, number 9. Is that properly stated, or is it the Norwich Finance Committee MOU? That's all I wanted to ask, Roger. Thank you.
Oh, right.
Okay. So you're speaking more in terms of it as it listed as an agenda item? I'm just
It's
trying to.
listed correctly. Is it listed correctly as an agenda item?
Is it? Yeah, I believe it's the Norwich Finance Committee, because the Dresden one is by Interstate Compact. So it's a factor of the Norwich and Hanover Finance Committees. So I think your MOU, I would have said this at your agenda time, but I wasn't able to get in. Sorry.
Okay. Well, thank you for noting it for record. And perhaps we'll restate that when we take up that agenda item for clarity. So thank you. Any other public comments for items not on the agenda? And then if not, I'll move on to select board comments. Linda Cook, do you have a second public comment? You're muted. Please press *6, Linda.
I'm sorry. Marcia, what number in the packet was that page that you said the minute was on?
If you download it, it's on page 46.
Okay, thank you. Okay, select board minutes. All right, what I was asking to change was number 2. After traffic calming, Linda Cook spoke to the support of the police department, and I deleted a piece and added with a savings of $20,000 on purchasing a 2021 model this year. We could save $20,000 plus once it's worked out. The second was number 6, and I was talking about the cameras. And I said that the dash camera footage was valuable to her in a case, and delete the Norwich Fire Department that was put in there that was not from me or on the tape. That's what I was asking to correct in the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, not seeing any more public comments. I will take select board comments. Go ahead, Mary Lee, I see your hand up.
I recently noticed in reading Chris Katuki's blog that the subject was hiring of a new police chief. And I noticed that individual, who's now the chair of our planning commission, makes several defamatory remarks about our town manager. I'm finding it highly disturbing. I'm finding an attack on our employee. And I think the select board should take this very seriously. I think a suggestion has been made that we come up with a code of ethics. I think we need that for all of our appointed and elected officials. We need to have a code of ethics to deal with statements like this. Because right now, they just come out of the blue. They come in, out of context. They come in right before we're going to have a discussion on the police. They defame our employee. I think it's really wrong. So I feel strongly that we should come up with a code of ethics, perhaps by our next meeting or the meeting after, and to try to deal with this sort of problem. I really appreciate that people want to serve, but I do think too that if they're in positions of leadership, that if they have a criticism of someone, that it should be made with respect. So that's all I'm going to say about it.
Thank you, Mary. Just for the record, which I think Claudette is probably signaling to, the Planning Commission has not reorganized to date, and so the individual I believe you're speaking to maintains their position as vice chair.
Okay, thank you.
But
But that remark is uncalled for in this town. It has to stop.
I don't know to which remark she's referring.
Would you like to hear it?
Probably not.
so I think Mary's point is like what, let me just summarize your broad point. You're saying that
Mm-hmm.
there may be a need for a conflict or an ethics
Code of
policy,
ethics.
code of ethics policy for appointed and elected officials, and that will extend to the comments that they make publicly on platforms, both as town platforms and just in the wider circulation of the world. So I think we can potentially explore that as a future agenda item, absolutely. And I think code of ethics is a broad topic for consideration for sure. Go ahead, Mary.
Just one more thing. Just as a teacher, teachers have to be very careful about what they say, especially, for instance, on Facebook. They might be very challenged and frustrated by their students. Some teachers cross the line and they complain on Facebook and maybe make derogatory remarks. We all have to, and there is a code of ethics that I've adhered to that says be really careful about that. When you are on the social media, you're not just in your living room talking to your family. You are in the public. And I think every public official needs to understand that.
Yes.
Just saying.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to thank you for your select board comment and think
Thank
about
you.
it for
Yes, I've
future
said
agenda
enough.
because we're not, this isn't actually an agenda item.
No,
But,
it's not.
but thank you for that.
Let's not let it get lost.
Absolutely. Thank you. So
Welcome.
I'm now seeing, so I'm seeing another public comment. I'll take that. Because the agenda item is public and select board. So technically I can move back to public. So go ahead, Nicholas, I believe.
I'm Nicholas Christakis, 641 Patrol Road. I just want to briefly respond to the prior comment, which is that any restrictions on speech by public officials is very difficult to arrange given our traditions in our society of free expression. So I take the point about there being ethical guidelines about expression. Of course, people should behave maturely, but to have a code of ethics that would restrict what public officials say would not be easy.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for your comment. Any other public and select board comments before we move on? We are starting our meeting with some juice, which is excellent.
On fire, yes.
Go ahead, Marcia.
I just would like to know when is the appropriate time to talk about the minutes from last time, because I think I have a correction.
Okay, so how about we move into our consent agenda right now? How's that? Okay. So like now we have the consent agenda. The action is to approve the consent agenda. I will begin actually by asking what we would like pulled, so that way we will approve that separately to whatever we move in the consent agenda. How's that? So we would like to pull the minutes from, is it 3:31 or 3:24, Marcia?
The last meeting, 3:20. The
30.
last meeting.
The last
Yeah.
regular scheduled meeting? Okay.
Yes.
Great.
So on number 4, I
Wait,
believe that.
hold on. Sorry, Marcia. We're just talking about what we want pulled right now. So we can move.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Okay.
I think, do you want me to start or wait?
So you want to pull that, and then is there anything that anybody else wants to pull from the consent agenda? That's my question. Or are we good with just these minutes?
Well, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I'm too many questions. there's a lot of correspondence about the police, obviously,
Mhm.
and that's on this number 4.1. So I'm not sure if we're going to address those then. If otherwise, I think they should be pulled. And then the Steve Flanders, I still continue to think that that should be pulled and looked at in terms of the preferred citing for whatever. And that's it.
Okay, so how about we pull the minutes? So what I'm hearing is we want to pull the minutes from 324 and the letter of correspondence from Steve Flanders. And then I believe it is appropriate to assume that the other correspondence will be worked into our conversation because we have a future agenda item that relates to it. And then, so when we just to sum up, when we approve a consent agenda, we are authorizing the signature of the AP warrants, we are receiving correspondence, and we are making draft minutes final, which will also include any subject to the corrections that have been submitted in there. So that's what we're doing when we approve a consent agenda. But we have now decided that we're going to pull 324 and that one letter of correspondence. So is there a motion to approve the consent agenda minus these items?
I move to approve the consent agenda minus there's a 324 minutes, correct? And a letter by Steve Flanders.
Yes, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Hello? Hello?
Whoops.
Go ahead, we haven't voted yet, so we'll have a discussion. Go ahead, is there a public comment I hear?
Yes. Yes, you did not pull the 324 ones to put my corrections in to discuss, or are they going to go through automatic when you pass it?
Linda Cook, we have answered your question. When you've written to the board and the minute corrections, when we're trying to approve the consent agenda, they will be moved as part of that correction. Unless you're
Thank you very much.
unless you're looking to correct your corrections.
No,
Okay.
that's all, Roger. Thank you.
Sorry, I just wanted to be very concise so we have a packed agenda. Okay, so now is there any further discussion, or can I take the vote on the approving of the consent agenda minus these items? Okay, all in favor?
Wait,
Oh, go ahead. Colette was raising her hand. Go ahead.
I just have a one question on the AP warrants. There's another Delta Dental that's stuck under Vermont retirement. I
Okay.
can find the page if you need me to, Herb, but there is a Delta Dental again under Emer's.
And there was a question too, also in the AP warrants to correct some of the dates and the invoices for our contractual services with our finance situation. So noted for the record for that as well.
So they're not pulled, but they're noted in this discussion.
We're now discussing the motion to approve the consent agenda, of which this is part
I'm
of.
not asking for them to be pulled. I just want
That's right.
Make a note of it. Okay.
Okay, excellent. So now we have more public comments on our consent agenda. So go ahead, Stuart Richards.
Stuart Richards, 82 Elm Street. I'm back to just the regular public comments. And
I would like you to hold that. We moved on from our public comment period. We're now moving on to public comment for items that are on the agenda. Okay, respectfully. Is that all right?
My comment doesn't relate to anything that is, it's not on the agenda.
Well, we have moved past from the public comment period, so I'm going to respectfully and consistently ask that you. Yes, thank you. I'm sorry, I'm trying desperately to be consistent as chair. Okay, so here we are. Can we vote on this consent agenda? All in favor? Excellent. Okay, now let's begin first with the Steve Flanders letter. Go ahead. How about we begin with a motion for that letter, and we'll have a discussion.
A motion to accept it.
To accept it, yep.
Okay, I move that we accept correspondence from Steve Flanders.
Is there a second?
Second.
Great. Now let's discuss it. Go ahead, Marcia. There wasn't a second. Who was the second? Miranda was confused.
I thought Marcia was the second.
I thought Marcia. That's what I thought too. Great. Okay. Okay. Now Marcia will discuss it.
Okay.
I just think that Steve makes valid points about the law, and that in general, the concerns here are so significant that we are going to, if we don't change how the town plan expects us to open everything up to a preferred site for solar, we're going to engender a lot of problems, and we can avoid that because people will be complaining when actual projects are proposed. And this is not how, I would dare say most towns do it. They look for places that actually will get them more benefit in terms of credits and the like from the state. I don't have the right terminology for it, but putting things, making it clear that we're looking for brown fields, tops of buildings, stuff like that, instead of ridge lines, which we've, had, open fields, that sort of thing. And that this is a bit unusual, and it's only going to be a cause of angst and upset.
Okay. Thank you. And this is sort of a letter that responds to a town, or I would say our planning commission's letter to an original response. So we previously pulled those items and had a discussion about that as well. And I had sort of asked if people felt like we wanted to make this a future agenda item, and we agreed that we would not pursue it as a future agenda item. So just to sum up where we are, does anyone have any further comment for to this correspondence? Good, Claudette.
No.
You're kind of muted, Claudette. I don't know if you know.
I don't know why.
Oh, go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
My connection is unstable, so the other option would be to petition to get that section of the town plan amended, and so that's always an option.
And indeed, the response from our planning director discussed the ways in which you could amend a town plan in a nice way that reminded us of what our responsibilities were. So any further discussion on this item?
I would just ask, as a board, do we really want to say to the Public Utilities Commission, yes, any place is fine with us, cover it with solar panels? Do we really want to say that? And if we do we really believe that the majority of people in town would agree with that?
And just by way of an answer, I do, because it's a part of the adopted town plan. And there was a significant conversation about this item. I remember very specifically Claudette Brochu, when she was chair, very much lingered on this question when we were taking our public hearing sessions. And so I will say that, and I think it's helpful that our planning director has laid out what the amendment process is. And so and I'll let others respond, but then I'll ask, just for consistency, if we would like to see this as a future agenda item. Any other conversation, any other questions, or can I just ask that question? Okay, go ahead, Mary.
I have found this topic confusing in the past, because I think the state if it's now the Public Utility Commission still, the state does have pretty strict criteria for preferred sites, but it probably wouldn't hurt if we even said we like their restrictions. It's confusing to me that it is wide open. So I'll just say that. But I don't know if I really want it as an agenda item at the moment, so.
Well,
Sorry, I'm a citizen trying to get in, but so anyone else would like to see it as a future agenda item while I help the citizen?
I think we need to go the petition route, if that's
Interest.
that would be my recommendation. That if Steve feels that strongly about it, then he should start a a petition.
So Can we make sure,
Go ahead, Marcia.
can we just make sure that that's in the minutes, that, you know, I think some people on the board are wondering about this and looking at the confusion between the PUC and the town plan, which is instructing the PUC to consider everything. And so that's what a town plan does. The PUC looks at the town plan. And so that's our statement. But I think it would be good to put in the minutes that, you know, certainly I feel strongly that people should petition if they feel strongly about it. If people in this town don't feel strongly and they don't want to petition it, then we can be paved with solar panels. But, you know, I think we need to make sure it's in the minutes clearly that that's an option.
Thank you. And I would say that I'm not in a position to, I'm in the position to refer people to our planning director's memo, which is very informative about what process went in for the town plan, how it was decided, what expertise was consulted, and then indeed, what is the role of this body, and then also, you know, what is the process for that town plan adoption. So I would like to actually move on because it is 7:03 and we're still in the consent agenda.
Consent agenda.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, appreciate that. So we have to vote to accept this. So all in favor of accepting? Oh, go ahead, Marcia.
The minutes. My concern was that I think.
Marcia, we have a motion to accept, to receive this,
Oh,
right?
The Steve Flanders piece of it, yes. So the
I'm
vote.
sorry, Miranda is gesturing wildly to me.
Sorry, you already voted that. Unless I went crazy here.
No,
I have it, Leighton moved, Callaway seconded, and you voted.
No, we were
didn't vote.
No?
discussing it, but
We
we're
didn't
gonna,
vote.
Sorry.
we're gonna, it's okay. Well, now we're gonna say all in favor of accepting this correspondence. Great. Now we have, thank you. And now let's talk about, can we begin with do we need to, no, we don't, now let's talk about the minutes.
So we have to move to accept them as well, I think.
Yes, we have to,
Okay.
yeah.
So I move to accept the minutes of March 24th.
Is there a second?
Second,
Okay, is there now a discussion?
yes.
Go ahead, Marcia.
Item number 4, I believe that I abstained from Gray and Levy. I did not abstain from Lamperti, I believe.
I believe that's true.
I believe that's right, actually. But we have a tape to consult, so we should just make sure. But I don't know, Miranda is precise, so. So I'm fine with that correction, if that's okay. So I confess now our rules of order. Do we need to vote on this motion and then have another motion to amend the minutes, Mr. Town Manager? Or can we just make that correction?
So either the mover and the seconder can accept that as a friendly amendment to their main motion, which would just incorporate it in there. Or you can do a separate amendment motion to accept that change before you go back to the main motion.
Okay.
I will accept approval as a friendly amendment.
Okay,
That needs
excellent.
to be seconded.
Okay. And I'll
With the
second
seconder.
I'll
Okay.
second that friendly. Okay, so now let's vote to both to receive the minutes as
Correct.
amended, as corrected. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And then I'm going to actually pause the meeting for 1 minute because I'm getting calls, and then this is clearly a lesson that the chair should also not be the emergency contact number for the meeting. Okay. So please hold on 1 minute. So people are telling me they're not able to get into the meeting, and I'm not sure how that's possible. I think it might be because I have pinned some people because I wanted to be able to see everyone. So I'm trying to.
Roger,
Yeah.
it's Charlotte Metcalf.
Mhm.
I believe because there were two meetings that some people were confused and they signed up for the first meeting and it doesn't allow them to get to the meeting we're in right now. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Charlotte. That was the first question I asked for the citizens in question, and
Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
the link Miranda sent says special meeting. No, go to the other agenda, the regular meeting.
Well, several people did suggest that
Yes,
link.
and
And I wrote back to them and said, no, that's not, I don't think that's it.
yes. So I'm going to move us on to our town manager report, and we'll dutifully listen. Grace, luckily, I have talked to her about the content of his town manager's report, so I can actively resolve this while we hear. Okay. So go ahead, Mr. Manager.
But just to try to summarize the written town manager report that's in here, with regard to the finance director, we're still working with Seth in the interim basis. He has updated some of the financial dashboard that you'll see at your next meeting with regard to financial monthly reports, and that's mostly due to the kindness of input from Claudette on trying to make it more not necessarily user-friendly, but more informative for the functional versus the object reporting for the coding. We also, but at the next meeting, we should have some more some procedure in place, some actual product that will be delivered to the board in a confidential sense, since it deals with some of the internal financial controls that we have. But just to let you know that you'll get some product with regard to that. And then I'm at the point where I'm going to have to do the sixth, yes, I said sixth round of advertising for a finance director, so that hopefully we can capitalize on that. The difference in this round of advertising is not going to be to advertise just for a full-time position. I'm going to advertise both for a full or a part-time position. With regard to the police chief position, obviously we're going to have a lot of discussion about that in a second, but I just wanted to let folks know that we had our extended deadline has closed. We have a handful of candidates, not a overabundance, but we'll start to review those in the very near future. The survey that went out there had about just over 215 responses. Those in a very quick rollout, those are in the packet in terms of the raw information. If there's further sort of detail or analysis that any board members want from that, please let me know. You know, if they answered this, did they say this type of thing? But in general, what I intend to do with the general aggregate information is to try to categorize, especially, you know, since there are a lot of text comments, trying to get them at least into categories of so that we can not necessarily minimize the comments, but see if there are general categories of commonality versus but I'll still keep in the disparate comments as well. But right now we have Sergeant Keeling continues to serve as the officer in charge in the absence of a police chief. We do have, and then moving into the police officer position, Officer Pregent opted to move on to a different police department. We've been fortunate to be able to hire just recently a new officer. His name is Brian Barry. He comes with a host of background information, including detective background. So we think that that's going to be a real addition to our particular community, especially as some of those things may come forward. We may have some really good experience to help in dealing with those issues besides the regular offices of patrol officer, duties of a patrol officer. We're in the middle of getting signature on a conditional offer of employment for our vacancy in our highway operations. So we will have an equipment operator hopefully on board. And again, this person comes with a huge amount of experience. And I think we're pretty lucky to grab them. But we're still finishing up the conditional offer, doing the background check and all that sort of thing. Board members, you'll be pleased to hear that the RFP for the IT related services is out the door. With looking to have responses back by May 9th. And then moving forward to trying to get it's the hardware, software licenses and all that up to date as the first phase that is needed for our vulnerability improvements. We're going to get to the energy related stuff later on with regard to the net metering agreements and all that. And then we've got a Casella contract. We did execute in the last couple of days after a little bit of back and forth. We have executed a 1-year extension of our current contract, and the idea of that in having some collaborative effort with the Solid Waste Committee that will get us through another year. But during this particular year, the hope is that maybe we can have some additional discussion and decide whether we have time to go out for proposal for bids on the hauling services. But again, some discussion to be had with that in the future. There are the other departments' reports that are in here as well. If there are particular questions that folks have on any of that, that would be helpful. I want to defer the rest of my time here, unless you have questions specifically of me. I want to defer the rest of it to Chief Alex Northern for the fire department, since the major component of the written part of the packet relates to a fire engine RFP that they have out there. And the intent of this is essentially to introduce what's happened so far. There's not an expectation of action on that tonight, but it's really the chief kicking this off. As you know, that we did do an RFP process. The results have come back. There's a host of questions that I suggested that the fire department be prepared to answer. They kindly have put a whole packet of information together that includes responses to my questions, which I thought would be questions of yours, in addition to everything else. So with that, Chief Northern, I'd like to just kick it towards you, and it looks like the chair wants to prevent me from doing something.
Actually, yes, respectfully. So before you do that, I want to make sure that other board members don't have any other questions about the other good information you raised. And see, Claudette does have a question. So go ahead, Claudette.
It's a question not related to what Herb has reported out on. It's just a general question, if that's okay, Mr. Chair.
That's okay.
Herb, just wondering the status of the delinquent taxes.
Yep. So there are a number of questions that the treasurer had on a number of the payments. Becky has been going through all of those to determine whether they're actually delinquent or not. A number of them, or many of them, relate to situations where when we're in a non-COVID environment, it's much easier when payments are made, because a lot of them are done. They physically hand it to it. We check the check out at that point. If there's something wrong, we can work with them at that point to say, oh, they need to draft a new check because they transcribed numbers, or they were short $40 or something along those lines. In the COVID situation, a lot of the checks either just came in by mail, were dropped off. There was no personal contact. And Becky, in trying to go through all of that, I think has put together everything that she could, but there's some lingering questions that Cheryl had, since she's responsible for signing off on the delinquent taxpayer warrant. So there's been some back and forth with regard to that. So once we get those final issues figured out, Cheryl will sign off on the delinquent tax warrant, and we'll get the notices out.
Right, and the last report that you had on the delinquent taxes, you said that the number of people that were delinquent were significantly up. And you and Becky had attributed that to property transfers?
There's a number of them that are property transfers, where folks that are not, they either don't know our tax payment system, or they had felt that their taxes had been paid, had prorated through the process, through the closing process. Normally, again, these are part of a lot of those questions that pop up when we have the ability to do the personal contact for tax payments. So again, it's a function of catching up with some of that. But generally, overall, once we get through this, there's either going to be, it's not up because of a lack of, it's not a lack of, say, unemployment or not being able to payments and stuff. I mean, I'm sure some of that is in there, but it's really more a function of not having the ability to have a personal contact to talk to folks as they make particular payments, or that they can call up. So but there is definitely more as it pertains. And then as the notices go out, we'll have better intel with regard to what is the particular situation on that. And again, I can't be more specific than that from the same question that you asked at the last meeting, because of we don't have the delinquent tax warrant yet fully signed and so where we can send out the notices.
Okay.
Okay.
And normally that's supposed to be done within 15 days by statute, but because of the issues of the lack of personnel contact, we've been trying to be more cautious, and especially Cheryl is being more cautious about before she signs off on it, to make sure that we have the level of accuracy that's required.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any other board member questions on significant happenings or the content of Herb's town manager report before he cedes his time to the fire department? Which was very beautifully sneaky of you, Herb. I had asked this not to necessarily be a presentation, but I'm happy to hear some framing of the materials. So go ahead, Chief Northern.
Yeah,
Oh, yes, sorry. So good evening, everybody. Thank you, Herb. In the mode of framing, I did want to just make some preliminary comments to kind of kick off this process, realizing that the purchase of a fire truck for a municipality is a large purchase. I do want to say that this has been almost a 2-year process that we've engaged in. The department was fully kind of mobilized. We had many participants. I do want to specifically thank my Deputy Chief Matt Sweat and former Fire Chief Neil Fulton, whose institutional history and fund of knowledge of both of them were instrumental in being able to put together the quite erudite and well-prepared report that we've submitted to you. I fully realize that we're not going to talk about it tonight much, but I did want to open things up and just state that we're looking forward to a conversation moving forward, and fully prepared to address all issues that will arise. So with that said, I think that wraps it up. I know I'm supposed to keep my time short, which I will do, because I know that our time is coming next time around. So we'll have the time to have a conversation. Thank you.
That's great. And so I actually have a question, but so does Marcia, it looks like. So
Yep.
Go ahead, Marcia.
I was just going to say it was a really well done report, so kudos.
Thank you.
But also I'm wondering, the recommendations, I think there were national somebody recommendations that fire trucks that are over 16 years old should be replaced. And it looks like both our fire trucks are over 16 years old. So I'm just wondering, are we looking at $500,000 this year and $500,000 in 2 years?
Well, Marcia, if I might, as I think you're a lawyer, and you will note the term "opening the door." So you've opened the door now to quite quite an elaboration, and I don't think I'm looking at the chair's facial expression. I don't think he wants me to kind of launch into a pretty detailed explanation of that. It's a great question. So I'm going to defer to the chair. Should I answer, or should we wait till the 28th to delve into that?
Well, I have a question that might be helpful, is framing that might help answer Marcia's. So perhaps I might ask that.
Sure.
Which is you reference an improvement plan and some strategic plan that was made between the years 95 and 99, and has there been a more recent assessment of by the department of the capital needs of the department that could that lays out some of the other purchases. So yes, so I'll repeat my question because that was being formed as I asked it. But is there a document, a more updated document, a strategic document that outlines the uses and the needs of the fleet of the fire department?
That to me, Roger?
Yes.
So we've had a capital plan, a capital apparatus and purchasing plan since 1997. And it has evolved over the decades to what we've submitted to you, the most current version in the RFP. And was also submitted to you back in November when we had our budget conversation. So I would just really defer to that document as the most present, most updated document that outlines our capital needs going forward.
Okay, and then to sum up, there are further capital needs. There are other expenses and other fleet purchases in that draft capital plan.
Yes, coming down the road in subsequent years, yes.
Okay. Mary and Claudette, any questions? Rob?
No, well done report, though. Thank you.
Marcia, did that answer your question? Did we get a 2-for-1 on that?
Not really, but I'll sit quietly until the next meeting.
But I think the answer is yes, there are other desired capital purchases under the current draft capital plan. So I think the answer to your question is like, yes, there is, but for presentation. Claudette?
Just one quick question. When I was looking at that report, I thought it had mentioned that the forestry truck was the year 2000 forestry truck. I thought that purchase was like 2017.
Yeah, I'm not sure what they'll be referencing. You are right that the forestry truck is, I think it's 2018, actually, 2018, 2019. Chief Sweat, do you, off the top of your head, remember what that was?
Neil Fulton, go ahead. You have your hand up. Perhaps we'll get an answer.
So Claudette, I believe it was 2018, 2019 that our current forestry unit was purchased.
Neil
sounds
Fulton,
right.
Neil Fulton, you need to unmute yourself and then go ahead. You can make a public comment.
The chassis of the truck was replaced in 2017, 2018. It's the third chassis that supports the skid unit, which has the pump, the water tank, the foam tank, and all that stuff on it. So what you use at a fire is from 2002. What gets it to the fire is from 2017, 18. So the body, which is called a skid unit in the business, has been moved. This is the third chassis it's on.
So, yeah, okay. I'll have to go back into the 2017 or 18 meeting minutes because I thought that was an entirely brand new purchase. But that's.
And I think to bring it into a broader point, if I may, Claudette, is that this future RFP, we would like to one way or another talk about this purchase in dialogue with the other equipment, with the fleet, right? And so having that, you can imagine we'll have other questions about other vehicles at the same time that we'll be talking about this one, but because our processes are perhaps not what they should be, we're talking about a purchase at the same time we're talking about your long-term needs. So that's the catch-22 for a future agenda item. But
Understood.
Go ahead, Marcia.
Just sort of a general question in terms of being a part of, this Upper Valley area and the collaboration that goes on between towns when there's fires. I'm wondering to what extent when we put together our needs, we're looking at what kind of collaboration is available from other places and if that changes the dynamic at all.
Well, I'm not sure which dynamic you're speaking to. We are a part of a robust mutual aid association, which comprises 26 towns. And we have mutual aid come to Norwich when we have large incidents, and we also go elsewhere to assist others. So, in terms of our, perhaps if you want to call it a strategic outlook, our capital requests take mutual aid into consideration in terms of the type of apparatus we have, how much water it carries, the type of equipment it carries. So we're part of a mutual aid system, and part of that system is for us to be able to contribute not only personnel, but the equipment to help our fellow towns out. Just as if we have incidents here in Norwich, we make requests of them to help us.
Okay. That answers the question. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's an excellent question. Thank you, Marcia. And we'll probably ask more of that at a future agenda item. But that's the kind of we'll probably start with these broader kinds of questions,
Sure.
and then go down to the very specific. But we have to approve a process for capital work.
Sounds good.
Mr. Town Manager, is there any further to your update, or can we move to the next agenda item? But thanks for your deputizing of the fire chief and for that.
Thank you. No, I'm all set unless you have more questions of me, because I know you have the pressing members of the public here to talk about other items.
They are pressing, which is excellent. They all, I think, we're able to get into the meeting. So, okay. So then we'll like to move on to the next agenda item. So the purpose of this agenda item, the board is not expected to necessarily take any action. What I will, we want to hear from members of the public. As Marcia alluded to, we've received several correspondence as a part of this agenda item, or that speaks to this agenda item, rather. So I think we're going to hear from anyone who would like to make a comment as part of this search. I'm going to enforce 3 minutes consistently. And then I'm going to ask board members at the end of hearing from the public if they have any reflections that they would like to offer. And then we'll have a little bit of a dialogue about next steps. Herb has believes that this is very much a good addition to his public outreach work for this position. Herb, I saw you unmuted yourself. Is there anything you would like to add before we open up to the public as part of this agenda item?
Just especially because there are a number of folks that haven't attended your meetings before, that this is recorded. So any comments will be captured not only by the minutes, but also directly in the recording. And we do put that out on CATV, like you would normally go see it in pre-COVID timeframes. And then it's also on a town YouTube site as well. So comments are not going to be lost with regard to what is spoken on tonight. And that's just as a refresher for those that haven't attended too frequently.
Great, thank you. And so as per the agenda item, are there any other comments? So a reminder, please raise your hand at the bottom of the screen. With the Zoom, you push the raise hand button. And if you're by phone, please press *9.
Sorry, I missed that. Would you just tell me again?
Yes, so if you're participating on Zoom, there's a raise hand button on the bottom. And there I see raised, so excellent, thank you. I will begin with how I saw them. So I saw Robert Stevens and then I saw Demo. So just your name and your locatable address before you offer a comment.
Sure, Robert Stevens, 643 Petrel Road. And I was just somewhat alarmed by what I was hearing about the desire to cut back on our police presence, and I just wanted to go on record that there have been 2 break-ins. 2 of my neighbors. One involved somebody with a ski mask and an axe during the middle of the day. Their son was at home, and it's my understanding that we don't actually have 24-hour coverage, that the police are on call after midnight. And that means that unlike Hartford that has 24-hour coverage, that means that in some cases there might be a wait of up to half an hour. So I'm kind of feeling the opposite, which is that why wouldn't we have what Hartford has, just to protect all of the residents? That's, you know, I open the Valley News and I see that there was a theft in a Norwich parking lot this morning, and then there is a quote unquote notorious convict who has fled from house arrest and is at large. And the notion of shifting from a armed police presence to civilians doesn't seem prudent. So I just wanted to go on record with those thoughts. I know that there is a need and a desire for more money targeted for mental health. I think that's wonderful. I don't think that should be taken from the police. And so I would urge the board to move forward with replacing the police chief and making sure that we have at least what we had before Chief Frank stepped down. How am I doing with the time?
Thank you for your point. So I would like you to wrap up your comment, if that's all right. And I now officially have a stopwatch, so I'm going to be more official. But
Okay.
So please wrap up your comment. But thank you.
Thank you. How's that?
Thank you. Thank you. Great. Demo, you are next. So just name and locatable address, and then I will start my stopwatch. Go ahead, Demo.
Demosthenes Stephanus, 82 Glen Ridge Road. And do you have to have your stopwatch now that I'm coming on? I promise to be brief. So I would like to add some important information to what has already been stated regarding the NPD. In the applications, reports, and ordinance section of the town website are the dates and links to NPD reports that were done in previous years. Law Enforcement Survey Report dated 9/26/2000. I believe, and I'm not sure, but I believe this is the one referenced in the letters and the Valley News, which stated that the town of Norwich has not engaged in a deliberate and community-led assessment of its public safety needs in over 2 decades. In 2007, 13 members were appointed by the Select Board and charged with studying the police needs in Norwich. Numerous police departments, people, and agencies were interviewed. On October 2007, after months of meetings, the Norwich Police Services Committee submitted the report to the police chief. Norwich Police Chief Douglas Robinson responds to the committee in November of 2007. And then on February 11th, 2009, the Norwich Police Services Committee submitted their final report to the Select Board, which was accepted. The recommendations were accepted and adopted by the Select Board and Police Chief, and community policing became a reality in Norwich. Former Chief Jennifer M. Frank took this to a whole new level and immersed herself and her police department staff into the community policing concept. There were many successful programs as a result of this, and even today continue to be a positive, in that they allow the Norwich Police to work as a team, if you will, to ensure interaction and not reaction. Coming to the end, I would encourage everyone who is interested to check these links out on the town website. Go to that report section, go down to the bottom, and they're all listed there. Our final report includes these short statements. Conclusion, we commend Chief Robinson for implementing our recommendations, in many cases proactively before our report was even completed. The Select Board, by its nature as a legislative body, will change in composition from year to year. However, we hope that it will continue to offer from firm policy guidance, but resist the urge to play armchair quarterback. And to all parties, police chief, select board, town manager, we offer the following counsel. As the years pass and memories fade, be mindful of the lessons learned from this experience. It was an 85-page report that took months. I'm finishing right up. And be committed to avoiding past mistakes. History would suggest that the town will need another police committee and another police report in 5 or 10 years, and here we are today. But it doesn't have to be that way. You get to break the cycle. Keep things running smoothly, adjust only if you have to, and please, please, please give your police and fire departments the support they need to do the job, especially when it comes to funding. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then I believe Stuart
Roger,
Richards.
I'm sorry. I'm stupid. I cannot figure out how to raise my hand other than to do this, okay? At the bottom, I see participants, chat, share screen. I don't know where my ability to be known as a request.
So you would like to speak, so it's been noted, and I have that. Don't worry.
Okay.
And now I'm going to take public comment from Stuart Richards, and then after that, I confess I don't know the order, so I'm going to just go through the list of the little hands that I see. Okay. So Stuart Richards, go ahead. You need to unmute yourself.
Stuart Richards, 82 Elm Street. Roger, I appreciate your calling on me. However, there were a number of hands that were raised before my hand was raised. So, and I can't tell you the order, but I think I'm happy to wait my turn in the order that that you would like to.
So I would like to call on you, Stuart Richards, and then I will go in like the order that I see them under the participant screen. How's that? So, but thank you, that was generous. So go ahead, Stuart, please make a public comment.
Okay, great. So I'd like to follow up with what Robert Stevens said. I don't know Mr. Stevens, but I want to echo his sentiments. I think that what he said was very valuable. You know, we live in to some degree, we live in a bubble, and I think it can be misperceived that we don't really need a police presence, or we don't need as much police presence as we have. But when I look at the police department statistics, and you can find that in the town report on paragraph or page II-22, I see that there were 342 traffic citations and 560 traffic warnings. And perhaps most importantly, in terms of public safety, what I see is that there were threatening and harassment. There's a number of instances of threatening and harassment. There's a number of instances of domestic disturbances. There's a number of DUIs. There's a number, 99 citizen assistance things that were done. And if you go down this list, you'll see that we actually do have a need for police. And I believe that the level of police that we have is appropriate. And I was concerned when I read, and I hope I'm understanding this correctly, but what I understand is that there's going to be a large conversation, a huge conversation about policing and what the policing ought to be without the presence of a police chief. To me, that is backwards. I think the police chief, I think it should be interactive. I think that the police chief needs to be hired. And I think that the police chief needs to be a part of the discussion. And I am really concerned that this is going to be done backwards. I'm also very concerned with what, because I don't have a personal experience of having been broken into. I know that there are other people who have been broken into, who have a real need for policing and for very fast reaction and very fast service. So I'm very supportive of Chief Frank, what she's done, of Doug Robinson and what he did. I think they did a great job, and they were great people. And I'm very thankful that we had their services for, I think Doug was here for 12 years and Chief Frank was here for 2 years. And I'm also I also just want to comment that I received back my check for community policing. There were 3 individuals that submitted checks for community policing. I think this is a very important part of our community, and it's a very important interaction between the community and the police. There were 3 individuals that wanted to make sure that there was enough money to do community policing. To not have enough money for community policing, I didn't want to see glow sticks for the kids taken away. I'm almost done. I didn't want to see the bike to school sort of activity curtailed. I didn't want to see the valuable things that the police do for community policing curtailed. So I hope that at some point here in the not too distant future, you'll accept our money so that we can continue with community policing.
Okay, I have
Thanks very much.
336. Thank you, Stuart. Next, so I'm just seeing the participants since I missed the order. It's Sharon Racusin, John Feldy, and then Steve Flanders. So Sharon Racusin, go ahead.
Sharon Racusin, 76 McKenna Road. I noted that Demos said the last report was in 2007. And even given that the last report was less than 2 decades ago, Norwich and the world didn't know then what we are acknowledging now, that people of color and other marginalized people have been and continue to be harmed by the type of discretionary power that the police have, including the Norwich Police Department and other PDs in Vermont and elsewhere, that the kind of discretion that they have at their disposal. Policing has not, excuse me, wait a minute, I'm reading. Policing has not been a universally helpful tool because of the use of armed enforcement when more appropriate interventions exist. Since the resignation of the chief, Jen Frank, we now have the opportunity to take time to rethink what Norwich really needs in view of new understandings of the impact of policing on our communities. Most of us are now conscious that in spite of the appearance of progressive politics in Vermont, excessive police enforcement against people of color stubbornly persists, even though there has been years of monitoring and retraining. Now that we find ourselves at a crossroad, the resolutions that we submitted to the select board are qualitatively different than most requests that have come before the board. This one is backed up by 400 years of history. Norwich is privileged in the sense that we are white and wealthy and have a substantial budget of up to $600,000 for a town smaller than Dartmouth College when functioning at full capacity. I may not know of any incidents in Norwich because my interactions with the police would probably not be the same as a person of color would experience. We should acknowledge this, especially as our communities become more diverse, and we need to take time to hear the perspective of all who are affected by our decision about policing in safe and respectful places. Difficult conversations are tools to get to the change we all want. It is human to look away from things that are ugly, and sometimes it's uncomfortable to talk about the truth. The resolutions aim to get a better understanding whether the size of the police force is appropriate. To simply fill this particular position because it's vacant isn't good enough, without knowing how the department allocates its time. What alternatives are possible? I'm hoping that the board will think of an interim solution to just hiring the police chief. And I hope that this agenda item continues in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you. John Feldy and then Steve Flanders.
Okay, thank you. Hi, my name is John Feldy and I live at 70 Koch Road in Norwich. In a dialogue about policing and crime, we should understand our role constructing and condoning a system that we have trouble controlling. We may be shocked by events in Minneapolis and be thankful that we're not like that. But in the Upper Valley, the same mistakes can and do lead to tragedy. The critique of policing should not be us versus them. The police are our surrogates. We endow them with awesome powers to act for us. Today, we are questioning ourselves and our decisions to deploy the power in so many ways. We have asked the police to do too much. Police acknowledge that, but are reluctant to curtail their reach. We acknowledge that, but are habituated to calling the police first. In recommending we hire a chief before allowing a debate about our needs, the town manager actually states the proposition for a debate. Is our current staffing level unsustainable? Further, I believe that determining what is in the best interest of the community demands a fuller appreciation of the limits of policing and a wider perspective of how their role fits within a comprehensive understanding of public safety. The town manager argues that a new police chief should be on board to discuss and refine the role of policing. That makes little sense for two reasons. First, it assumes incorrectly that it's easier to hire a chief when the job description is fluid rather than fixed. Doesn't it make more sense to determine the parameters of the job and then invite interviews? Second, it presumes that the staffing level is settled. When dismissal of police is tightly constrained by contract, wouldn't it make more sense to pause before hiring? The town of Norwich has studied policing previously in 2000, and in 2007 and 2009, those reports answered the question, how to make police services better. The survey this year follows that same narrow pattern. They did not ask a more fundamental question of how we improve public safety. It was understandable that they seek the advice of the International Association of Police when studying the workings of the department 20 years ago. Today, such a limited view would not lead to changing the paradigm. Asking whether our encounters with police are pleasant or aggravating doesn't address how adding to social services aimed at preventing crime can contribute to the public safety equation. To prepare for the future, we need to look at the role of police from outside the narrow confines of law enforcement. In 1992, when Bill Clinton threw his wholehearted support behind community policing, I thought it was a sensible reform. Today, I believe that in spite of what good it might appear to make, highlighting it distracts from addressing how resources allocated to social services can make communities safer. Thank you for hearing my views.
Thank you, Sean. That was exactly 3 minutes. Steve Flanders, go ahead. You're next.
Thank you. I hope I'm unmuted. Can you hear me okay?
We can, and then David is next after you, just so people know.
Thank you. So I support periodic review of police departments and how we do it in Norwich. It's an important function of the select board, aided by citizens. However, I feel it is incorrect or unwise to delay selecting a new police chief, because in doing so, you are delaying supervision of a police department. That's not a skill set that is normally available to a town manager. It's a specialized skill set that only a properly selected police chief has. And so you need to have somebody who supervises both the day-to-day actions and the performance of the staff, and delaying that is not good in any organization, to have an unsupervised organization. I feel that some people have the impression that the police chief has a political aspect to it. It's basically an administrative and supervisory aspect under the guidance of the select board and the town manager. And so the select board sets the policy based on the wisdom of the public. And so my advice to hiring a police chief is to do it promptly, but to advise any candidate about the nature of the discussion that's going on in town, and ask them whether they would be prepared to implement the outfall of whatever that discussion might be. And I think the interview could make a range of predictions as to what it would be, and you could assess how receptive the candidate was to adopting or accepting and implementing with sincerity and skill whatever the outfall was. That concludes my remarks.
Thank you so much, Steve. I'm just scrolling through the participants, and I do see that law enforcement is present in our meeting, and so I think that's important to note for people who are making public comment. So our officer in charge is here with us, and so I'm not asking them to speak. This is for the members of the public, but I just want folks to know that. So David and then Kathleen Shepard.
Hi, my name is David de Geisel, and I'm at 175 New Boston Road, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I consider myself and others lucky that I think we live in a very safe town, which doesn't mean there is no crime. And I think we spent an extraordinary amount on our police force. And even though we're a wealthy town, there are restrictions on our resources. And I think because we spend much on the police force, we spend less on other services. And one way in which I daily see that is that I think a lot of very essential services are funded through charity, through Dan & Wits, which is one way to fund services, but I don't think it's equivalent to, for example, a funded police department. So I strongly believe that there is a role for police, and I'm glad that we have police in the area. I'm not certain it needs to be in town, but that there is such a thing as the police. Yet I think it's time to study what we really need in this town, and I suspect that we need to shift and reallocate funds to other services, social services. And I've heard others speak about the difficulties of managing jobs in the police force. And while I agree that it would make sense to have somebody lead the police force at any time, I also think that if we hire a new police chief now, that we will be very limited in the ability to reform the police to the town's liking going forward. So therefore, I strongly believe we should examine the needs of the town before we fill that position. Some of the services that I think are missing are mental health services. I think there are also other services that we easily equate with police, which I don't think have to be fulfilled by the police. I think glow sticks and right to school bike day does not fall into the hands of the police. I think we as a community very well could assure the safety of children on the street without the police. I think we should look into technology solutions for traffic violations. I'm originally, as you can tell by my accent, from Europe. And in Europe, you do not get pulled over by a police officer, but you get flashed by a camera and you pay the fine. So I think there are other solutions to the public safety concerns that we have in our town that do not require such a large police force. And finally, while I much appreciate the larger conversation about safety and the impact of the police force on minority populations in the United States, especially Black and other people of color, I myself do not find the concept of public policing very pleasant. I do not appreciate seeing blue flashing lights when I drop my kids at school in the morning. To me, that's not a sign of comfort. Does not make me feel safe, but it aggravates me. And I do not wish my son to be walking into a school that's guarded by police, armed police. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Kathleen Shepard and then Heidi Lockwood. You're on mute, Kathleen.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak with you today. And I'm Kathleen Shepard, 447 New Boston Road. And this discussion of body cameras for police has raised some important questions for our community. And I feel like we need to do some research on whether that sort of technological innovation makes police more accountable, whether it help to create trust or mistrust, and whether they help resolve disputes over what happened in an encounter between police and members of the public. I'm very happy that this moment and the fact that we had a resignation of a competent and good police chief, that it is a moment at which we can start looking at the broader questions. Before we hire more officers or chiefs, we need to dig in to examine the role of policing in our towns and states. So let's open the conversation about whether armed police should be doing all the tasks we now assign them. Should they, rather than cameras, be monitoring traffic? Should they be the ones to respond to persons in mental health crisis? Are they the ones who should intervene in domestic violence situations? With the documented continuation of discrimination in our own state and towns by police against persons of color or person with other visible differences, how can we be sure that police are active protectors of everyone's rights? So of course, the US right now, we are in an appalling situation of guns everywhere in the hands of nearly anyone. And this makes the work of police much more dangerous. I really appreciate that. A number of years ago, I heard a policeman in Bethel state the obvious, that intervention in a domestic violence situation is the most dangerous situation that the police face in our little towns here. And there have to be better solutions to the arrival of an armed person in that setting. At least one of our residents has experienced credible mistreatment by a recent member of the Norwich Police Force. And I feel we would be remiss if we call this a bad apple situation. But neither should we be demonizing police because of it. It points to the need for thoughtful rethinking of the ways that our communities and policing have changed in these past 15 or 20 years since our last major community-wide discussion. So I favor better systems of accountability that provide paths to resolve problems between the police and the public, just like we have for teachers, as I was, and for healthcare providers. And just because Norwich is a rather sleepy and mainly affluent town, it doesn't mean that we can take a holiday from one of the most pressing issues of our time, appropriate policing. So I'm asking the Select Board to create a forum for this discussion, form it soon, and let's work on it before we do further hiring. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. Heidi Lockwood and then Charlotte Metcalf.
Thank you. Heidi Lockwood, and I believe my husband's also on camera. We're from 90 Meeting House Road, and actually our new Norwich residents, or we called Norwichians. We moved here last summer with our 3 kids and my father, so multi-generation family. We absolutely love the town. We've been enjoying the moose and the bobcats and the coyotes. However, we have had already 2 extremely uncomfortable interactions with the police. One was regarding an apparent flag on my husband's license or license plate. We haven't been told which. It still has not been spelled out. We were informed via email that whatever mysterious situation there was had been resolved, but we're not told why. And it took us 2 months of emails and back and forth and being stonewalled. What we're asking for is not a defunding of the police, and we're not opposed to community policing. We're asking for the community to be in the community policing. We are asking for the community to be an active participant in this venture, in this joint project of keeping our community safe. Yes, we recognize we need police, but we also recognize, as do experts across the country, that the police, armed police in particular, are not the ideal respondents to, say, a case of mental illness or circumstances such as domestic violence. We don't want the tragedies that we've witnessed around the country to be repeated in Norwich because we are over-responding or responding with weapons. My husband and I happened to live in Ridgefield, Connecticut during the Sandy Hook tragedy, and one of our children was at that time an elementary school student in the next town over. So we endured several extremely anxious hours while her school was on lockdown, and extremely anxious weeks and months that followed as the police responded to false call, false alarm after false alarm. There was a security officer that was hired by the town to protect the school. That security officer did not have a gun. He sat at the entrance and checked the license of every parent who came to pick up every day with nothing more than a canister of mace in his pocket? Why do we have police in the halls of our elementary school with a weapon without parents knowing? Why do we have a program that was modeled after an NRA program, once again, without parents knowing? I adore Marion Cross. It's the best school any of my kids have been to. And I have a 28-year-old, a 17-year-old, and a 10-year-old. So that's saying something. But I really think we need parents to be involved and community to be involved. Thank you, Roger. So I just wanted to kind of underscore this. I've written a letter about body cameras and the privacy concerns and whatnot, but I really want to underscore this by saying we need to participate in the hiring police. We had a police officer here in the department who was on the scene when a police shooting occurred in response to domestic violence incident in 2003, who turned.
Sorry, Heidi, I do have to, I have to be consistent. So
okay, I'm sorry, have I've gone over, Roger, already?
Yeah, please wrap up.
So my letter speaks for itself. Thank you.
Thank you. No, yes, and as Marcia said, when we talked about the consent agenda, we recognized that we saw letters as part of this. So thank you. Charlotte Metcalf, and then Lena.
Yes, can you hear me?
I can.
I want to thank everyone who's spoken because it's made me really understand better why there is a concern about evaluating the kind of department we have. I have already understood before this meeting your concern about guns in schools and police and flashing lights. But I want to read you a statement about my own personal interaction with the police and the need for the police in Norwich. I was alarmed and dismayed by the suggestion that we should continue to have thorough discussions about our desired form of police protection before hiring a new police chief. It may very well be appropriate to have these discussions, as I've just said, but I believe it is imperative to move now to have the full policing capability for which we are paying taxes. In the past years, there have been serious transgressions within a mile from my home that required police action, not just intervention or de-escalation. Let me explain. There was a robbery in broad daylight when 3 young people were in a neighbor's house, working virtually in separate rooms while the owner was out grocery shopping. One student noticed a door open in an upstairs bedroom and realized there was movement there. As they fled the house in silence, the 3 students called police, then watched as one man leapt from a second-floor window with some loot. Each man escaped through woods, my woods, to a road where a getaway truck awaited them on my road. There was an intrusion into my own home in the middle of the night, which was interrupted by a call from the alarm company to whom I whispered things. All is not right. Someone is in my house. They reset the system and notified the police. I held my breath in terror for the half hour it took Chief Robinson to arrive. He set off the reset alarm at a second time because the intruder had closed the door behind him. There were not 1, but 2 daylight break-ins at another neighbor's home where the perpetrators persevered despite the alarm that was sounding. The neighbor who lived there, the second time it happened, has since moved away. Life there was never the same for her and her husband. All of us who have been affected have felt violated by our experiences and are more consistent in using our alarms, even as we go out for walks and always when going to bed at night. We have all spent money to enhance the ability to identify and apprehend any perpetrators. A drug exchange occurred on open land, my land, involving 5 young men with 2 different cars. I encountered them and spoke to them, and then it occurred to me to get a license plate. After being given a license number for the Subaru, the two of the boys were driving. A Norwich police officer identified it as a Hanover registration. He said he would wait until after hours. Is that time?
Yes, but just please wrap up. That's okay.
Okay. All right. The police officer went to the home of the student who was driving his family's Subaru. And I just feel as a taxpayer, I should not have to beg other residents to accommodate the hiring of a new chief to fill the department, which has been lacking a full complement of officers for a good part of this year. When that step has been taken, then there may be enough time to allow for a full discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. And so Lena, and then Deborah, and then that is all the hands that I see. So if you're feeling sheepish, oh yeah, there we go. So there's more hands, which is great. Go ahead, Lena Myers. I think there's two names here. So please go ahead.
I'll actually be speaking. My name is Zay Gomez. I live at 1645 Beaver Meadow. So 6 people have died from a life-saving vaccine that Vermont has now pushed pause on to evaluate administering it, to evaluate those concerns. On the other hand, police are the 6th leading cause of death for young Black men and are responsible for about 1 out of every 16 homicides. And still, we're trading the perceived safety of some of the actual safety of others. Furthermore, there is no statistical correlation between increased police spending in a community and decreased crime. This resolution asks to put pause on the process of finding a new chief, just one member of the department, until the very real and statistically supported concerns about police are addressed. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Deborah?
Hi, sorry for the late hand. I was really reluctant to speak tonight, but I feel I need to. I'm actually a neighbor of Charlotte's, full disclosure. I live at 15 Powers Road. My name's Deborah Hannum. I was part-time here until a year ago, and now I live here full-time. And in 2020, there were 47 calls to 911 that the Norwich police responded to. And that was compared to 24, so roughly half the year before. I was one of those 47 calls. I'm not going to go into the details of what happened, but it was a very, very serious incident. And what it did was it really highlighted to me how important the police are. They responded as quickly as they could. The perpetrators have still not been apprehended. There are some good leads. There are persons of interest, but for a variety of reasons, the case is still open. And I'm just worried that if we delay in hiring a chief and making sure we have a full complement of officers on the force, it sends a signal to other would-be perpetrators, including the ones who committed the crime at my property, that we're an easy target. And I know that makes me not feel great, it doesn't help me sleep at night. So I appreciate all the concerns that people have raised, but I do think that we will be very vulnerable if the word gets out that Norwich is cutting back on its protection. So that's really all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Nicholas, and then Lena Myers, but perhaps the second person on that Zoom screen, because we heard from Zay or Z. Nicholas, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to speak briefly and join. I actually heard a number of things which were quite interesting about, for example, how the presence of the police at the school. And I'm sorry, I'm Nicholas Christakis. I live at 641 Petrel Road. We have children in age range from 28 to 10 ourselves, one of whom goes to Marion Cross. And so I wanted to validate some of the concerns, but I wanted, if I could, to suggest that we disconnect the issue of the number of police officers we have. And I think we should absolutely replace the police chief position. and the nature of what they do, and or the amount of funding we allocate to other things. There's no reason we need to constrain the trade-off between the police per se and investing more in mental health, for example. I would gladly support an increase in taxes, for example, to provide additional services in the town. So I don't think we need to connect those two. I think we should assess the extent to which we as a community need police. And I think Bob Stevens spoke at the beginning about how our next door towns have more policing even than we do, with more availability, for example. So I think that is one issue to mention. And I also think that we can deliberate and should deliberate on the proper ways that the police should act, whether we should have some of these technological solutions or not mutually exclusive. We can have cameras so the police don't have to do police traffic stops, what kind of training the police get, and so on. I wanted to mention that it is not necessarily the case that the absence of police increases safety, especially in a well-armed state like ours. In fact, if anything, the people might take justice into their own hands and start shooting people that come onto their property because they feel like they can't call the police in time. And that certainly makes no sense either. I think we would rather have a professionalized police force that the citizenry can rely on to provide the safety they need. So I would add my voice to those that say, let's hire a new chief, ideally like the one we just had, who I thought was terrific. And if necessary, and establish a commission to deliberate what the nature of policing in our town should be, and perhaps add allocations of funding for other services that our community should provide.
Thank you. And then Lena, and then Liz Blum.
Hi. Hi, everyone. I'm just gonna read the four resolutions at the end, just like to make sure it's really clear what we're talking about here. So it reads, resolved, signatories request that the town of Norwich define the scope of a data-driven study of the 911 call system, including but not limited to reviewing the literature on 911 calls for service, mapping the 911 call system process, analyzing 911 call audio, and analyzing computer-aided dispatch data. Such a data-driven study would require the participation of neighboring communities and partners and should identify and implement 24/7 alternatives to the current 911 call system that will address community members' immediate concerns, needs, and or emergencies without the involvement of the police department in some or all areas, including allowing for callers to opt in for police involvement in call response. Resolved, signatories request that the Select Board conduct an independent, third-party public health and community needs assessment with the input and participation of a wide variety of stakeholders, including and without limitation, community members, educators, social service providers, housing advocates, and mental health professionals. Resolved, signatories request that the Select Board and Town Manager explore, develop, and present an actionable strategy for transitioning employment from an armed sworn police officers to civilians in all areas of activity, including but not limited to traffic control, animal control, interpersonal violence, and community and mental health wellness. Be it further resolved, signatories request that the Select Board and Town Manager refrain from hiring or promoting a new police chief and department head or any other police department employee unless and until that position in the Norwich Police Department can be proven through a comprehensive public health study and with input from residents and experts whose perspectives those residents may wish to include, and taking into account the clear nationwide statistics contesting the correlation between policing and public safety to be the shared vision of the residents of Norwich. The Select Board has a duty to ensure that its officials act and respect the democratically identified best interests of Norwich residents. So those are all of the resolutions that we're speaking about today. Do I have time to say something myself, or is that?
Yes, you're at 2 minutes, so go ahead.
Yeah, so in addition, this is just then me personally saying something, but I think what's important about this is not that we're saying that like, that there's nothing going on that needs to be addressed in the town, right? It's that police don't create safety, police don't prevent harm or address it. And I know there's been a lot of fear mongering the way that people are talking about things right now, but like that's the main point. And then the main point is actually seeing what what issues are affecting the community, where harm and violence are happening, and then addressing those things without the use of the police department. So that's just my sidebar. But and I also live at 1645 Beaver Meadow. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And you were reading a resolution that is in the packet that was signed by 6 Norwich residents.
Thank you.
Clear for the record. Thank you. And then Liz Blum and then Paul Magniello.
Liz Blum, 48 Cliff Street, Norwich. I have a few things to add to what's already been said, although I thank everybody for the comments they've made. I think this is a very thoughtful discussion, but I wonder why, if we are supposed to trust the police, we have 2 unmarked police cars. If police are so transparent, why don't they just have the cars marked? And another thing, we are paying for a very expensive public safety building. It's not called a police station. It's called a public safety building. And I believe that our discussion should be about public safety and what that means in this community. I think that's been alluded to by other speakers. I've seen things that are going on in other parts of the country. There are some really great models out there, and I think we should consider trying them. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul Magniello.
Good evening. And as Liz said, I appreciate the comments that have been made this evening. And I've already submitted a letter, but I did want to, just from listening to some of the speakers, and especially Charlotte and Deborah, I feel for the interactions, the adverse interactions that you've had in the past. But the reality of the situation is that we will never get to zero crime in our town or any town. There's just no way that we would be able to make sure that there was a police on every corner. And so the reality is that you are making an assumption that by studying this issue, that we will make ourselves more vulnerable than we may actually, than in reality. And so I would, again, hope that we can study this issue, look at actual public safety. I agree, and I appreciate Lena in reading what the requests are being made on the select board, and that we do need to have data, and we need to know what exactly our police are being called for on 911. And so until we have that information, we really can't make a rational decision as to how to handle this, the public safety in our town. So I'm basically done, but I just want to, again, thank everybody's, comments this evening. And I hope we can go forward and come up with a good solution. Thank you.
Thank you. And then Linda Gray, and then this is my final sort of call for comments, because we are over time, but I want to hear from people. So it's worth going over, and I see more hands. Great. So Linda Gray, and then Lynn McCormick.
Hi, thank you. Linda Gray at 175 Kerwin Hill Road. And it seems like we're getting close to wrapping up, and I want to echo Liz's observation that there's been a thoughtful discussion. And it seems to me that there is consensus, no matter from all the citizens who spoke up, that there ought to be, that the select board ought to follow up and create some mechanism to review police. The key question I think the select board has to figure out is kind of, it's whether to proceed prior to completing that discussion with hiring a police chief, or whether to delay that. And I think, to my mind, that hinges on whether an interim police chief can function well. And I myself don't know the answer to that. And so I would just highlight that I believe that's the topic that the select board ought to try to figure out, whether that an interim can function well for the department or not. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Lynn McCormick, go ahead. You're muted, Lynn McCormick.
I'm sorry about that, and I'm sorry my video's off. So I just, my 10-year-old daughter, sorry, I live at 394 Main Street.
Thank you.
My 10-year-old daughter has been listening to the public comments and growing increasingly concerned that someone may break into our house due to the lack of current police staffing in town. And I started to worry that, maybe she shouldn't be listening to this and it's creating a large amount of anxiety. Maybe I made a mistake letting her listen. And then I'm reminded that it's my privilege to choose whether or not I'm going to have any conversations about the pros and cons of our current model of policing with my children, who otherwise, and so far, have a wonderfully positive view of the role of police in the community because they've had really positive interactions with the former Chief Jen Frank. I'm quite certain, however, that I would have already had a much different conversation if my children were not white. And my 10-year-old daughter, my 8-year-old son would have anxiety. And that anxiety would be constant and it would be present everywhere. And it would probably only be worsened when an armed officer gave them a high five or let them play with handcuffs or was present at their school. I don't know how many officers are actually needed to adequately protect our town from crime, but I do know that there's a really, really important conversation that needs to be had, and we need to open up that conversation to many more people in town than are here at this meeting tonight. And I don't think there should be a quick move to hire a police chief at this time, just in order to maintain the status quo. Thank you.
No, I'm muted. Thanks so much. I don't see any further comments. Claudette Brochu is raising her hand because she's probably alarmed that people are putting comments into the chat. I'm happy to summarize. Deborah Hedman gives statistics relating to calls. Sharon Marcuse encourages to continue this conversation in future agenda items and supports some comments made by the public, by previous commenters. Okay, so I'm going to, I'm Stuart Richards, respectfully, I'm because we're over time, you've already made a public comment, so I'm going to ask that.
This is not really a comment. It's just a question.
Okay.
Brief, very brief. 10 seconds.
Go ahead.
So can you give us an idea of where this is going and what the chronology might be?
So
I think that the conversations that we've had have been very helpful and that they've been very useful in terms of highlighting the concerns of people on various sides of this issue. So, but I'd like to know where we're going.
Yes, so thank you. You've emceed what I would like to do next, which is I mentioned at the start of this agenda item that I would like to hear board member reflections on anything that they've heard and what they perceive to be next steps. And then I have talked about this conversation a little bit with our town manager, and so I want to share some insights from that conversation. So any board members would like to offer any reflections? I am sitting down for this portion of this agenda item. Anyone? Go ahead, Marcia, thank you.
I guess a few things that come to mind. I mean, we have 40 square miles of town, I think, and we have an obligation to every square mile of that town. I think that we can't paint every town the same, every police officer the same. We can't also be blind. We don't live in the most idyllic place. The most idyllic place doesn't exist. Vermont, you know, I grew up here, and when I was born, this was a very different place. So I have no illusions about how we've changed and the fact that we are in this country and we're awash with guns. That is not to say that I feel happy that there is a need for people to walk around with guns on their side. And I've never been comfortable with it. But I think we have an obligation to both protect our citizenry as well as the people who travel through town and the people who work for us. And I think yet again, we're in a situation where the ball is rolling on a particular initiative and people are upset about it. Some people are upset about it. And I think that's an unfortunate way to run the town. And that at this stage, I think a reaction of saying we're going to make a huge shift by not hiring somebody would be a mistake. But I also want to underscore that I think that we're in the driver's seat. And if we hire someone, we make it clear, as was suggested by someone tonight, that the facts may change. I think we do need to have a study. We need to look not just at 911 calls, but I think we need to look at logs. We have to see what's been happening in this town and what we need, and probably separate some of the things that have happening as has been suggested. But let's not forget, we have a major interstate, which Customs Border Protection tells us has all sorts of folks going from Canada to New York. And that's 2 minutes from our school. I don't ever want to be in a situation where the children in our school are at risk and we don't have enough people to help them, or people on the outskirts of town in the middle of the night can't get help. So I'd like to see us embark on a comprehensive study and also proceed with a lot of caveats with the hiring of the person that has already started.
Okay. Are there any other reflections from board members? Claudette, go ahead, Claudette.
Yeah, it's, I personally would like us to really consider the interim police chief, or discuss with Thetford a shared police chief while we review this matter. Just the shared chief alone. We shared Doug with Thetford when they didn't have a chief. So it seems to me it could be, we could approach Thetford with that idea while we gather all of this other information and have a thoughtful and data-driven discussion about what we need for policing, how the police, et cetera, et cetera. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Claudette. Mary?
I'm inclined to go forward with hiring a police chief and also to have a discussion about our policing and our needs. And I think there may be some corners of our community that we don't really, we're not really aware of, where we could use some support for people. I know shortly before she left, the chief and I spoke a little bit, and he said it was tough. Last week, there were 2 suicides. For volunteers to help with that, that's tough, you know, and we had an attempted murder a couple of years ago. There are serious things that happened. I do think that the police should be well-trained, of good character, and that when they enforce the law, it should be equitable. That people should be treated the same under the law of equal protection. But I think that I just don't think it's prudent to not hire a new police chief. I also think a chief could provide leadership for the rest of the force and cover the hours that the town has become accustomed to, having police cover. So I appreciate the conversation, but I'm not willing to hold off on the hiring of a new chief.
Okay, any reflections? Rob Gear.
Yeah, yes, okay. I agree with everybody so far. So I think it's dangerous to have no administration, no active administration overseeing the department and however many people we have left actively on the force. It's a skill set that needs professional training, and I don't feel comfortable with that position being open. I do, however, feel that it's really important to impress upon candidates for the position that as a town, we are very much concerned about equitable treatment of everyone, and be very much concerned about looking deeply into the career history of whoever we hire, whether as a patrol person or as a chief. And we have to do our due diligence to make sure that there isn't anything being covered up, that somebody we hired does have a clean bill of health and can accept the guidance of the town in desiring to ensure that we don't succumb to some of the same problems that the rest of the country has.
Okay, so I'll offer a reflection, and then I'll sort of speak a little bit about where the conversation that Herb and I had. So I think it's, first of all, it's not lost on me that we're having this conversation in the middle of, I referenced a week that felt like a month, right? And so I think, there's certainly, privilege is an inadequate word to describe that we're having this conversation while we're seeing, state-sponsored murder, which is the only way that we should characterize what happens when someone dies at the hands of police, right? So this conversation is happening while the wider world is happening. I think what's really important about this resolution and the things that people have been saying is that that resolution problematizes the history of policing at the same time that our citizens have identified opportunities for thinking about public safety and community wellness more widely. So it is completely appropriate to understand the structural and obviously racialized history of policing, and then ask, what are the opportunities for understanding behavioral health needs and other and interpersonal violence, drug use, mental health, right? So I think there's two things that I'm picking up on. There's a willingness to problematize or acknowledge that policing is not a system that can solve some of our other needs. But at the same time, people are saying, I think everyone is acknowledging that there is absolutely a role for the police. And so this conversation was never about not having a police department, although that isn't with our power to do if we wanted to do that. We were never looking to not have a department, but we were simply saying, is it appropriate to have a police chief or a sworn officer oversee community safety and community needs? And I think what's really there's a sophistication that, if I might toot Norwich's horn, I can't believe I used the expression toot Norwich. Anyway, but I think there's a sophistication that was brought forward. We have expertise by medical professionals and other, the material that was brought forward by our community was thoughtful. They're encouraging us to also think about alternatives that could be supplementary, but could very easily also replace. So I think we should support anything that looks at the structural and racist history of the police. It's also an ableist institution. It is also a violent institution. And I think violence, it is an important history to acknowledge, right? We're so sort of beyond understanding things in terms of training or in terms of individual bad actors or good actors, because I think we've had many good actors in our community, mercifully. But as we've seen, we could have someone who has training for 26 years and mistake a gun for a taser, right? And so I think there's this is more than anecdotal knowledge. So anyway, which is, and I could digress more about the harm that traffic enforcement could bring and the need to explore alternatives with that. Why are we having animal control be under the police department? There are ways that we can sort and characterize what it is their duties are, which is probably why we need to have a data-driven study, right? So not only for what our police do, but what are the needs of the community. So those are my reflections. The too long didn't read or didn't listen version is good to problematize policing, really important to look at the opportunities for how we serve public health and community wellness. Now, Herb and I talked about how it's actually really not our call under Title 24 in a town manager form of government and under his contract and his job description, it is his responsibility to make this hire. And he, to his credit, has identified opportunities, including this evening, for public input. That being said, I am, like Claudette, would like an interim solution to think about these matters more fully, because I think it is disingenuous to suggest that, and I apologize for taking some time, but I'm now moved on. I moved on from my reflection, but I think it's disingenuous to suggest that, that we can shape that role after the role is made, or after the role is hired, right? So, that being said, I think we're not taking any action this evening. I asked board members to offer a reflection. I think there may or may not be a need for a future agenda item. And I'm gonna pause because I see Marcia has her hand up. But yes, so I gave a reflection and then I talked a little bit, just to sum up, we talked a little bit about, statutory authority and who has the ability to make this hire. But go ahead, Marcia.
Statutory authority 24 VSA 1233.
Yes.
The authority of the select board. In all matters, the town manager, he or she, shall be subject to the direction and supervision and shall hold office of the select board. So I think, yes, there's that job has that in its description, but the buck stops here. And I disagree. I think we do have the right to say, this is the construction we want to put on this particular position, if that's what we want to do.
Yeah. Okay. So I think where we're at right now is there's no action for this board member, for the board to take for this agenda item. I'm hearing from Claudette and Marcia a willingness to potentially offer a recommendation to our town manager. And there's a question of even the statutory authority or, this vision. But so I think right now, for the sake of this, I want to figure out what future agenda item can be made in the future. If there's a consensus for future agenda item to carry this conversation forward. Go ahead, Marcia.
Just a question about where we stand in the hiring process. I think that's key.
And I think it's appropriate to turn over to Herb to offer his own reflection of what he's heard as well, and then maybe update us about this hiring process.
So the process right now is that it was extended. The deadline was April 9th, so the deadline for that has passed. I'm in the middle of reviewing resumes and other information that came with the applications. My intent is to establish an interview process that will include a panel. It wouldn't be just me interviewing as a for instance, and that is intended to include a couple members of the public, probably a couple members of the select board, a member of the police department, and I haven't put that group together yet. So if there are other individuals that I might choose to have on there, I would. But typically, when I do my hiring, I usually have 3 to 5 people as part of the process. What I would ask the select board, what I typically ask the select board to do is if there are any select board members that would like to review resumes, to provide some input in terms of who they think would be suitable for interviewing, and then having a couple board members actually participate in the process. That's not an uncommon process for me. Once I get through that particular process, there's usually if there's finalists or a finalist, there's typically some kind of what's called a board of review for police officers, which is a much more intense sort of interview process as with a board of peers. There's also during that process an intense background check that is beyond anything that ever occurs with any typical employee that's hired in municipal government. And then the intention is to utilize the survey results, information from this forum, obviously the correspondence that is part of the packet tonight, and any other correspondence that I review, to help in establishing what would be the questions, and it would help to formulate the overall interview hiring process. And then the idea is to have a person on board, and then with that person on board to engage in a wholesale community participation similar to what's going on, that a lot of the discussion that we talked about tonight. At this point, as I've indicated in my town manager report, I'm inclined to have somebody in the position first. There are some discussions that Roger and I have had, and we've agreed to have some additional discussion about what might be some of the ways that we could figure out a way to have I don't know what the word would be, but more trust or faith in the process is somewhat of a structure of any contract that goes with such a police chief, that there could be written into a contract some of those particular things that we need to talk about. The interim solution is one that, again, I would continue to have some discussion with Roger on to see if that's makes a level of viable sense. But I am pretty concerned about being only at 75% staffing and the issues that our police department have to deal with. And I do agree that there's a lot of discussion that we need to have, but I do again think that we need to have somebody on board in order to have that discussion.
Right, and so it's not just necessarily about, I want to dismiss, if I may, this idea that it is just about a right individual for the right town, right? Because I think our citizens have done a really good service of understanding, for talking about some structural issues, whether it be structural racism, whether it be about what public health looks like, or what is it about my public safety and how do I feel safe, right? So I think, to that end, Herb, and I think you touched on this, what are some of the structural ways that, it's not just about having citizen input, what are some of the structural ways that, people can, that people can sort of put their trust on this? And one of the things you said is, it can inform a contract, right? Which is great. And then the other thing that Herb and I talked about that I want to put out there for the public is, the way that people have community control of the police, if that's something that we wanted, which is not actually something that citizens talked about. People really talked about understanding more about policing and understanding more about public health, but community control of the police, which is an issue that Burlington is dealing with, revolves around a charter. And there may or may not be lots of issues in Norwich that could be discussed through a long-term goal of a charter, right? And that maybe is actually the end all of this operational planning that we keep alluding to, right? Because there's a huge process that takes place with that. So I just wanted to state for the record, that's one of the other things we talked about in our conversations, because we were, talking about, authorities, right? Who has the authority to set a vision for a department? Who has the authority to make the hire? Who has the authority to censure, right? And fire. So I just wanted to sum up that conversation. So I guess from now, because we're way over and we have such a long agendas to go to, I'm looking to see if there's consensus for a future agenda item for this conversation.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm seeing that. Go ahead, Claudette.
Yeah, and to me, what I would like to see on the agenda is, as
Please.
Marcia stated, we dictate, or we manage the town manager. So I would like to see an agenda item that has us decide and discuss whether or not we go the interim route or whether we allow for a longer contract hire.
Mhm.
And at the same time, I would like us to discuss pulling together a citizens advisory group to just investigate all of the other the issues surrounding policing in Norwich and public safety in Norwich.
Some of these resolution items, perhaps.
Pardon?
Some of these resolution items that we heard, perhaps.
Yes.
So thank you always for your clarity, Claudette. You're far less cerebral than I am, which I appreciate. Go ahead, Marcia.
I think that what Claudette said would make a good motion, but I would add to it that if there's going to be a citizens group, that the board is has a lot of input into what is actually going to be investigated, because I think that data is key.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Sounds good. I like the ideas. I like. Yep.
Is there an agreement by consensus, or do people feel that they would like to make a formal motion? I would prefer not to make a formal motion because we didn't state that any action was expected for this agenda item. Sorry, I shouldn't have influenced.
We often form agenda items for the next meeting.
Okay.
We don't always do it at a meeting, but that's a standard procedure. And personally, I like Claudette's suggestion and also Marcia's suggestion. So
Okay.
I'm okay.
Okay. Well, thank you to all. I think we're going to take our well-deserved break. I appreciate all the members of the public who are coming, who came really informed and thoughtful and respectful, and were vulnerable, right, to have these conversations. And I want to acknowledge that you showed up, right, in many ways, and so much thanks to you. So let's take a 5-minute break. It is
Roger,
now,
can we do a 10-minute, please?
we can do a 10-minute break, and we'll start at 9, and I'll be looking at some of these agenda items
Yes,
while on the break.
Sounds good.
Okay. Thank you. See you all at 9. Thanks to members of the public, unless you want to join us for the rest of our meeting. Okay, it's 9 o'clock on April 14th. I'm resuming the select board meeting. I believe Marcia will soonly rejoin us. Otherwise, we're all here. I would wonder how board members would feel about tabling item number 9, the reauthorization of the MOU. I think it's totally appropriate for us to delay that until the 28th to when we're also discussing about appointments. I put 5 minutes, but nothing seems to ever take 5 minutes. So I would like to table that, if that's all right.
It's okay with me.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. And so let's begin then.
Roger,
Go ahead.
Can I ask one question? The item number 8, the discussion of work plans and goals.
Yes.
I noticed in the packet that you and I were the only ones that submitted goals. And
Tom was alluding to that.
so I'm wondering, I know it's something that we really want to do, but absent 3 other members' goals that we have been able to review, I'm questioning the
efficacy.
Yeah.
So, so I think we should sort of, I think we should touch base on number 8 a little bit, but I agree that we may be better suited. I even myself, I would be better suited to chair a discussion that has more intel, right? So I agree that we should shorten that agenda item when it comes up. Is that helpful to you? Does that help address your point?
Yes.
Okay.
I would find it helpful too, that I would like to give more input. I've just not had the time.
I
So.
understand that. Okay, so so that's all good information, since it is not lost on me that we're supposed to have ended our meeting and we're resuming our meeting. Go ahead, Marcia. Were you raising your hand? You're on mute. Yeah, I know, right? Are you unmuted now? Sorry. Oh.
Uh-oh. She's stuck?
Oh. I just asked you to unmute. Okay. Why don't you leave the meeting and rejoin it? How's that sound? Okay. And then in the meantime, I'm going to set us up for agenda item 6. But we won't obviously take any. We'll wait for Marcia to we won't wait for Marcia to rejoin us, but we won't take an action until Marcia is able to speak. Okay, so the action for number 6 was town manager will discuss reconciliation work completed to date. Board will be asked to perform work or else define next steps. Motion may be required. Herb very clearly authored a memo to us.
Roger, I need to interrupt. Sorry, Marcia can't even leave the meeting. Can you kick her out?
Sorry. Okay.
Sorry to interrupt, but I read her lips.
So I'm going to remove and you rejoin. Well, it says once removed, Marcia will not be able to rejoin the meeting. So I don't really want to, I think she just froze. So I think she's just having some computer issues. Because now we have a very frozen robotic Marcia staring at us, unfortunately. Oh, we have to have humor, if nothing else.
Or can you put her out in the waiting room again and then bring her back in?
Sure. This didn't really happen last year. We were spared of all Zoom debacles, but I think we saved it up for this meeting. Like everything of the past year was just all this meeting. So I do in the interest of time, we have a quorum and I want to respect that's 9:05 and that we have an agenda. So I trust that I would like us to move us along a little bit if we can. We could if it would make sense, we could reorder some of why don't we could reorder some agenda items if we don't want to proceed with number 6 without Marcia, because we can reorder a table at any time.
Could she also just call on a telephone?
I don't have a method of contacting Marcia outside of email.
Let's see.
Is there a consensus to how about I would like to maybe reorder the agenda. I would like to continue our meeting. Okay, so either we can quiz feed with number 6 or we can reorder the meeting to hear a summary of number 10, for example?
Let's go to 10.
Yeah,
Okay.
let's go to 10.
Great. So
Hi, this is Mary Layton speaking. Just wanted to get.
okay. So okay, so we've
Marcia's back.
She's back. There she is. Marcia, can you hear us? Okay, can you we hear
Yes.
you? Okay, great. Oh my goodness.
Sorry, it rebooted.
Okay, so we're all here. Mary's gonna hang up with, I imagine, is maybe a housemate, because she's on the phone talking to someone looking for you. Okay, we're gonna continue our meeting. Oh, the folks who must be watching our meeting. And number 6. Okay, so the action item says the town manager will discuss the reconciliation work completed to date. Board will be asked to perform work or else define next steps. Motion may be required. And Herb had a memo from the town manager. There's a memo from Herb, our town manager. It also included a memo from the Energy Committee chair who did some work on this project. And there's a lot of backup information. So Herb, would you like to sort of kick us off, and then I'll ask if there's any board member comments.
The main reason why I put a memo together is that I think that I'm at a point where I don't feel I'm going to spend any more time on this particular issue in terms of the information that's been gathered so far, short of getting some stuff for Bonnie Batchelder. I think that at this point, there's been adequate information collected and discussed and available and has been made available. So what I'm proposing basically, and I've already had discussions with her and she agrees, which is Bonnie Batchelder, our independent auditor, to prior to the audit season coming up, to review the information that's out there. Most of it she's already received. There's just a couple other things that I would have to do to pull together for her, and then letting her loose, sort of thing, that she's more than happy to review the stuff for an amount that she estimates to be not to excess of $1,000. So that would be professional services. And that's what I'm proposing to move forward on. And my real intent is to proceed forward with that unless the board tells me not to.
Okay, but in reviewing the materials that informed your memo, you determined that we're receiving the appropriate solar credits,
Yep.
and that the reconciliation work, is what we should expect contractually. Is that
correct? Yeah, we did have an error that in the reconciliation a couple years ago, which Linda Gray and I talked to SolarFlex on. We got that worked out. Part of some of the upward lumps in the budget for electrical costs are a result of that need to pay the past year or two's worth of money that we owed contractually to SolarFlex. So that's a piece of it, but basically I'm satisfied that what they're doing we've gotten our appropriate level of solar credits, that they're appropriately documenting it. But in the interest of assuring that, I don't agree with a member of the public that mentioned getting a forensic audit, but I do agree with having an independent review, our auditor review it from the standpoint to see if there are any flags that she might be able to find based on the information that's out there. And the idea of that is to essentially to satisfy folks so that we can move forward. And if there are issues that need to be addressed, we'll address them. But other than that, I think this is the attempt to get a level of independent review and to confirm or otherwise identify what has or has not been done.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions by board members on the content of Herb's memo or any of the supporting documentation? Go ahead, Marcia.
I'm just wondering if the person selected has any expertise in this field, because it strikes me that this is probably unique. And so maybe just an auditor per se wouldn't be the right way to go. Maybe, I know from looking at like the state of Vermont websites, they have an auditor out in Washington State who does stuff. So I suspect, like most professions, there's a niche for this. And again, I don't want to spend, you know, thousands of dollars to find that there's no problem. On the other hand, I think spending $1,000 if the person has no expertise is also a waste. So that's what I'd like to know.
In my opinion, I think she can handle this particular task. I think that I'm trying to also be sensitive to the budget and what we've already spent on professional services through this fiscal year, and trying to get something done in a relatively expeditious timeframe, but not with a sense of trying to rush it through. If the board feels that they would like to hire somebody else or to work with somebody else, then I would encourage you to make that determination. But I think that would mean probably going out and getting some bids from people and risking it being greater than the $1,000. Because the more, I'm not disagreeing with you, Marcia, I'm just saying the more expertise that you get, the more expensive it's going to be. And the closer, and again, I do not believe this needs to be done with a forensic eye. This is essentially looking, I think, at a fairly not basic, but there is a mathematical calculation for it. I think that the figures go at it. It's labor intensive because we have so many bills that we have to go through that it's not for lack of a better term, it's not an easily sort of like digital process. It's a lot easier now that Green Mountain Power has changed the ability to get information from them, whereas we had to do everything totally by hand in the past. A portion of it has been, so to speak, mechanized. But I'm confident in Bonnie and her abilities. If you folks would like to go in some other direction, I'm happy to, cater to your recommendation.
And just to be clear, you're engaging Bonnie because she is the town's independent auditor, which became our independent auditor through the RFQ process.
Right.
So
Yep.
I'll there's that.
And she is familiar with our system, having done 3 audits. So that's a piece of, to me, what plays into it is she's familiar with NEMRIC very well, which many people are not familiar with. And so she knows how to move about that system. So to me, from my standpoint, it's not, I understand what Marcia is saying in terms of the specificity of expertise in, say, group net metering or solar type of contracts. But I do think that there's a balance that I'm trying to play with regard to getting an independent review, a level of familiarity with our system and what's going on, price, and then trying to make sure that there's a level of independence. And again, I would defer to board members if they think otherwise.
Okay, any further questions or comments? Go ahead, Mary.
I'd like Herb's suggestion, and I'd like to put this behind us.
Okay. So why don't we actually, and I apologize, why don't we make a motion, and if there's continued discussion, we'll discuss it in the discussion period, because there's a motion that we could make.
Well, I'd like to move the one in the, just on our motion sheet.
Sure.
I move to support the town manager's intent to hire Batchelder Associates, the town's independent auditor, for an estimated amount not to exceed $1,000 to review the solar credit financial information.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Rob. Okay, so any further discussion on this motion or anything that we've been discussing related to this agenda item? So I'm not. So you have shocked us with a wonderful deliberative process, Herb, it sounds like. Are there any members of the public who would like to make a comment? Okay. Well.
Vote, Roger.
I'm going to call the question. All in favor? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Herb, for your work, and Linda Gray, who in her capacity as the chair of the Energy Committee, who volunteered to form the basis of this recommendation in some ways. We thank you as well. Okay. Moving on to the revised net metering agreement. So the board will be asked to amend the net metering agreement with Solaflect and to authorize the town manager to sign on the board's behalf. The amended agreement was in the packet. May we begin with a motion?
I move to amend the net metering agreement with Solaflect and to authorize the town manager to sign said amended agreement on behalf of the select board.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, made by Mary, seconded by Rob. Discussion. Go ahead, Claudette.
I have one question just because I can't recall seeing it in the amended understanding. Is this a time limited agreement?
25 years.
From
20.
today, from when we signed, or from when it originally started?
From the commissioning date, which I think is the date that we sign it, amending it.
That was my understanding.
It is
Herb,
25 years, right? It's like the life of the it's like the life of a solar facility, basically.
so I would actually like to ask Herb the answer to Claudette's question.
That's a good idea. Yes.
Herb, do you know the life of the contract? If it's from the date of which we're amending, or if it's the date of the original contract?
I'm gonna have to say I don't know. Would have to research that. That's just the first I've heard of that. Whether it would be honestly, I'm not gonna. I mean, Marcia's got the legal background, so I would defer to her in terms of that.
My understanding was as amended, but Marcia, you had your hand up.
It just, under terms in the contract, it says 20 years from the commissioning date. I can find it for you if you want. But I mean, I find that kind of concerning because it's so long. There's a couple things I find concerning, but I'll wait my turn.
Yeah, so if it's 20 years from the date of the amended contract, that to me puts it past the effective date of the solar panels themselves.
Right.
So I would really hesitate to sign a contract for 20 years. That may
have 5
I don't
years.
know what the implications would be if the solar panels are
Not functioning.
exceed their life expectancy before the contract ends. So that's one concern.
Okay. Do you have
And I'm
any?
sorry I didn't raise it prior to this meeting.
Marcia, go ahead. You had your hand up, or I think you had mentioned you would like to make some comments.
Yeah. I mean, just certain things like the service provider gets all the environmental credits, so it doesn't really give us anything. I think as I read the EPA website, we don't get to claim that we're, carbon neutral because of it. And that's on section 11, page 8. And then on section 13, page 9, we have to cooperate with their efforts to obtain financing. I thought that was, I mean, I don't know anything about solar contracts, but that seems a little bit like a contract of adhesion, meaning we don't have much choice. And then I guess I just, I'm not sure what we get out of this. I've listened to the finance committee members talking about things being more expensive. And that's part of my concern about, how much we're paying for. What's the purpose of this? I know we've got a new building online and we've got, according to Exhibit B, we've got 11 meters in town, but it really seems to me important to know what benefit are we getting other than we know that we're using more solar power than we would get if we were just using Green Mountain Power, who also uses solar power.
So I
Okay.
just,
Go ahead. No.
well, yeah. So I wanted to just summarize what it is that we're discussing in this agenda item a little bit. So I think like Marcia, and if I may, well, I'm going to. So I think Marcia is referencing wider issues that like may extend outside of the particular agenda item that we're asked to do now, which is that we're asked to approve the amended agreement as mutually agreed between parties. So there was our previous discussion was really about amending this contract to reflect the actual facts on the ground, so to speak, right? Particularly the location of the panels, right? And it was that directive that we gave to our attorney to amend this. So so I think like I think anything that has like technical questions is like one area, and then anything that is like contextual or like questions the efficacy of the contract more broadly may actually be a broader conversation. You can make these points, but I just wanted to reorient us.
So to clarify, there's really two major issues for me. And
Please.
One is that section 13 about we have to cooperate with their effort to obtain financing.
Okay.
What does that mean? And the 20-year from commissioning date.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Marcia, for that clarity. Go ahead, Herb.
Well, I think I have the answer to Claudette's question. I just had to go find it. So in the email version that has the amendments in it on the page 2 of 3, number 5, except as amended herein, all other terms and conditions of the net metering agreement shall remain unchanged and in full force and effect. So I think what's stated there, Claudette, is that we only made 2 amendments with regard to the matters that we talked about, which is the panels out of town versus in town, and then the other issue, but we did not touch the original term of the agreement, so that remains in full force and effect. So it's 20 years from the time frame that it was commissioned, not 20 years from the amendment, in my interpretation.
Okay.
But again, Marcia actually has some legal background. She can either disagree with me, but that's where I'm coming from.
Any further discussion or any other comments? Mary, did I interrupt you? Did you?
Nope, that's okay.
Rob, did you have any thoughts?
I was just trying to commissioning sounds like from the time it was put into service. But again, as you mentioned, as Herb mentions, I'm not a contract lawyer, so I'm not sure.
Go ahead, Marcia. Oh, sorry, Rob.
Neither am I, Rob. That's why
but you know how to look for catchwords that might kill people.
Marcia is a board member like you and I here, right? She would want to know.
You bet. I just think it's worth asking, because if the life of the thing is going to be expired before this, if in fact the time that we sign this amendment means that's a new commissioning date, I think that's significant. And I think we need that definitive answer.
I think that Herb found it, actually.
No, what he found, I'm sorry, is a clause that's sort of like boilerplate. And it means basically that if you amend one thing, it doesn't change the rest of the things. And so nobody's touched, as far as I can see, the commissioning date clause. They haven't said, this thing is different. I don't know. I think it's worth asking.
It's not clear.
Okay, and so Marcia, can you restate your other concern so I can just see if other board members also feel the same way about that concern?
Yeah, it's just this section 13, we have to cooperate with their efforts to obtain financing. Page 9, section 13. I don't know what that means.
Linda Gray has her hand up. I think she may have intimate knowledge of that. So go ahead, Linda, can you make your public comment?
Hi, yes, thank you. Linda Gray, 175 Kerwin Hill Road. And so I do want to say that the commissioning dates is, as I am not a lawyer, but I've been familiar and talked to lots of solar developers, and we talked about these kinds of issues in terms of entering into the contract to start with. And it does refer to when the panels go into operation. So it's for us, it turns out, I believe that was December 2014. So it's 20 years from that. Typically, the solar panels will, they have warranties that last 25 years, and they will many times be operational long beyond that. So, so that's one question. On the question relating to cooperating with financing, the financing has taken place already, and so that's done. And so the amendment to the contract does not relate to that at all. These solar panels are in place. They've been financed. Also, the one other thing worth mentioning is that in terms of the renewable energy credits, one of the very strong reasons that we picked SolarFlect among various potential solar developers that we might have worked with was that they did not sell the renewable energy credits. They did not sell them off for a second stream of revenue. So that they are part of the project.
Thank you, Linda. There's another public comment, so I'll take Pam Smith's public comment.
Thank you. Pam Smith, 1445 New Boston Road. This agreement was signed in September of 2013. The field in Lunenburg, I think, was commissioned in December of 14. But I remember Bill Bender saying something in a memo that he started giving the town credits earlier than December of 14. I'd have to go back and look at his communications, but as I understand it, the commissioning date is prior to December of 2014. It's somewhere between September 13 and December 2014. We'd have to look at Bill's memo to see exactly when he started giving those credits. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I mean, for me, I feel comfortable with the commissioning date. We've all sort of read things out loud, and we have I think there's an understanding of that. I'm also comfortable with I had suspected that the financing had already taken place. And so I'm also comfortable with that concern as well. So I think for me, neither of these concerns stop me from moving forward. And I would like to know how other board members feel and also know if there's other concerns. So would someone who would like to begin?
I'm ready to vote.
No other discussions? Okay, go ahead, Marcia.
I just think unless Linda Gray works for SolarFlect, I'm not comfortable saying that, this is, the financing is done and it's in the contract. So if you look at the four corners of a document, it's there. Mm-hmm. And I think that basically we should do our due diligence and ask for something in writing. What's the commissioning date? And what does this mean about obtaining financing? I mean, why is it there?
I think it was there because they were looking to obtain financing in the 2013 to 2014, which they have done. And now we are looking at it more closely because we need to amend our contract to reflect the facts on the ground. But
does it need to still be there?
Right.
If I may say, it may very well be that the financing they have is at a certain rate, and they might find a source of financing that's lower and wish to change over. And we would, if we were objecting to any changes whatsoever, we would maybe kill the deal. I know on EC Fiber, refinancing it was a common occurrence during its development.
Thank you, Rob. Any other further discussion? Go ahead, Marcia.
I think that's a good point. I'm wondering if Herb has anything to offer about what the financing, I mean, you know, I would think, what do we have to do in terms of complying with that if they're going to refinance?
Herb, do you have any ideas on would you like to offer a response?
I don't at this point, and I'm not, prepared tonight to talk about these issues. The issue I was prepared to talk about were that this group decided not to get into an overall set of different issues that they had concerns about in the past, but to focus on the two particular issues. You had discussions with your attorney at a previous meeting. This resolves those two particular issues. So that's all I'm really prepared to talk about. I'm not, it's fine if you want to do, I mean, I would have to do additional research, but I'm not prepared tonight to talk about that. Sorry.
Yes, no, absolutely. And I have a lot of appreciation for that. And I reminded myself of what this agenda item was, and then I've allowed our conversations to go elsewhere. So I would actually like to call the question and vote. So the motion, okay. So all in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Okay, we're going to roll call. I'm going to roll call.
Roll call.
Mary.
Yes.
Rob.
Yes.
Claudette.
Yes.
Marcia.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Thank you, everyone. Okay. So we're going to have a more abbreviated conversation on this because it's 9 for the discussion of the 21-22 work planning goals. I think, as Claudette alluded to, we should have the benefit of having full board discussion and some written material, so we could better have a better conversation or full. So I actually want to begin a little bit with the capital budget prioritization. And I think that Claudette was the one who offered something. And so I would like her to talk a little bit about not so much like what she prioritizes, but what she did for that. So go ahead, Claudette.
So all I did was pull up the Excel version of the capital plan, added a column, I believe, and put in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to match my goals. And essentially they were matching, some of it was a match to my goals. Some of it was, oh God, I just lost my train of thought. Oh, some of it was based on, I did not, as I wrote in my memo, I did not deal with anything related to sidewalks, bridges, roadways until we had the results of those studies that are upcoming in this next fiscal year. So part of it was based on what I felt were needs, and part of it was to match my goals. And I only prioritized a few things. The others I did not even include without having the broader discussion of goals and operational plan and or strategic plan. Does that work?
Yes, so that was, and so how did you, how were you able to separate what you were, why did some things get named over others? Like, so why did some call for an operational plan or goal setting and some items didn't? To you?
Be hard. I don't know if I can state specifically why. Some of it were, when I looked at when I determined my goals, I really looked at what we could what was achievable in the next 6 to 12 months, I felt. And some of those did not coordinate or correspond with capital budget requests or the capital budget and plan. There were items on the capital budget and plan that that I really think we need an operational plan or a strategic plan and an operational plan before I could prioritize what I wanted for those items. Like cruiser replacement, like fire department replacement. Some of this, yeah.
So I'm trying to like tease out your process to see if it could be a model for other people's.
Probably not, because some of it was just the pants and gut.
Yeah. So your prioritization, to use your word, was really a value-based decision from everything that you do, from all the knowledge that you have, right?
Yeah, and from listening, you know, knowing that a frontline Freightliner plow truck is from 2010, to me, has a significantly greater priority than glad Alex is not here, a fire department truck.
Well, he'll hear it.
So,
okay, so just to be
for which I could not quite follow the rationale for the fire department truck, because we are lacking up-to-date ISO.
Okay, so for you, it really was, so I'm just trying to tease this out. So you, it was really beneficial for you to look at the proposals for the most recent fiscal years, and you began sort of looking at priorities within like what was upcoming more immediately. Is that there? Okay. So if board members were to engage in a prioritization exercise for capital budgeting, one thing they could do is they could begin with looking at the fiscal year itself rather than by department. So that's just what I wanted to tease out. Okay. Go ahead, Masha, I saw your hand up.
So I didn't send it in, unfortunately, but I've got it. I did my capital budget a little differently.
Okay, do it.
Well, basically, this week I listened to the Bernie Sanders thing. Thank you, Herb, for cluing me in on that one. And I've been reading and thinking a lot, and it just seemed to me that I don't feel like I have a good handle on the money yet. And to me, it feels like I put down a list of things that turned out to be really my operating plan goals. And then from that, I sort of teased out the capital budget priorities. And essentially, I was focused on, I need to understand what we really have and what it's promised for. What was it voted for? How much is there? I don't like things being commingled, and yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but your papers are moving, and so it's hard to hear. But go ahead, but you want to understand each individual.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like you can't do a budget and really plan unless you know what you've got. And then I focused on, for the capital budget priorities, dividing things into two categories. The items for which funds really have been budgeted and which those funds exist now, versus the items for which no funds have been budgeted, but pose a hazard. So if we have the funds, I would say, I was convinced by the fire truck. You know, if the national recommendation is that you shouldn't have a fire truck that's over 16 years old, then maybe we need that because we have chimney fires and we have lots of things that could use a fire truck. And that puts a lot of people and property at risk. Even if we didn't have the funds, I really think that climate problems are going to, you know, be major in terms of storms and that. And I think we need to make sure that we can repair the culverts because that's critical to moving stormwater. Repair bridges which are in danger of, you know, collapse, repair the roads which are posing a danger, if any. invest in speed control technology, because I hear that as a recurrent theme in town, and amend and the ventilation system in town buildings, because I think we have to protect against future airborne diseases. And I think that we're not by a long shot out of this sort of pandemic spiral. And then for goals, I just put down 10 things really. Keep the lights on. You know, we have to keep the place running. Amend the structure of the bank accounts. Reduction of debt and elimination of borrowing. Review the police protection needs. Put some climate defenses into place. A general disaster preparation. Highway road safety, workplace safety. Coordinate the select board agenda with committee work, and institute a process to review committee expenditures before they're incurred, because we don't want to be in situations where we're in a position where something has been promised or ordered or negotiated and we're not in a position to pay for it, or it isn't really in concert with the general plan. So that's how I did it.
Okay, so I'm hearing two things. So to sum up what I heard from Claudette and heard from Marcia, it's valuable to see the information as it's budgeted by fiscal year. So rather than just have the option to discuss by department level, but then also understand, like, you know, how the grand total for FY 21 to 22, the grand total for 22, 23. So really being able to, by way of prioritization, be able to see like the fiscal years at a glance for, you know, as part of the seeing the whole capital budgeting. And for Marcia, what I'm hearing is that she's really into an asset inventory and understanding assets that have budgeted funds, whether it be, or budgeted financing, whether it be designated funds or otherwise, and everything else becomes a priority based on you know, our risk, right? Or how much, you know, what's at risk. So that's what I've heard so far. And so Mary and Rob, as people who are going to do this exercise, what's a way for you to begin thinking about capital budget prioritization? Because Herb and I are listening to this as intel as we try to set up some questions, as we try to create a plan for more discussions. Any ideas, Mary or Rob, how you would take on the prioritization of capital budget? Go ahead, Mary.
I don't quite know yet. I know that I've been reading, you know, the materials that have been put out there and thinking a lot about condition, thinking about, you know, I thought in the the fire department's presentation about the new fire truck, it was helpful to know the dates. It was also helpful to think that at one point, I think the town wasn't really thinking much about updating the trucks, that they were just there and they were really old. And then there was more of a concerted effort to stay on top of it. And it's helpful to have information that the trucks shouldn't go on beyond a certain age. I think that's helpful. I wonder about things like in one of the documents, it mentioned a gravel shortage, a natural gravel shortage. And so I didn't know whether that was going to mean that our extensive network of gravel roads was suddenly going to become way more expensive to maintain. Like if we had to use crushed stone or some alternative to natural gravel. So I was wondering about that. I think was also noticing that I think that internet technology in this day and age can be considered part of infrastructure. It was not really, you know, seeing that in the mix. I think that should be in the mix. And also wondering about condition of Tracy Hall, wondering whether we need more information about that. So there's a lot of moving pieces in my mind, and I'm not quite sure yet how I'd put them all in order of priority, but all I can say is I'm thinking about it, and I would, and you know, I do intend to do the work, but obviously it's not ready tonight.
Okay, so it sounds like for you, it's you're informed by content-based decisions, and
well,
would
by condition, condition and age. I'm just concerned that I really liked things to be on kind of maybe a maintenance cycle, or consider maintenance, consider overall condition and
Okay.
age.
Okay, so that's so part of your way of assigning prioritization will be existing maintenance schedules and other documents that support their life cycle costs, essentially.
Yes, and one more thing, just that I've been thinking coming out of the child care committee, something the school board has been looking at, which is possible state reorganization of the education formula that would really raise the education tax through the roof. And I think that would affect, if that happens, that's going to affect all of our capital planning. So I don't know how real it is, I don't know how imminent that is, but I just see it almost as much of a threat as a big storm.
It's real.
Yeah, no, it is.
It's real.
It is.
No, it's true, but I mean, how do you talk about that? I mean, I did a SWOT analysis. I sort of put it away and didn't submit it, but that's kind of like looming for me, that part. Here we are talking about trying to allocate money to keep everything going, try to get our designated funds to actually reflect what we need to do and not to do excessive borrowing, but we might get hit with that.
And you have to create a plan in order to adjust a plan, right? So what I'm hearing, I'm taking notes. I'm making us all sound very focused and elevated, which is an understanding of assets and their life cycles is sort of what Mary's saying. Marcia's saying she wants to have a little bit of an asset inventory and understand what items have been budgeted, and then for everything else, items that don't have any financing, what the prioritization should be, what poses a risk. Claudia is saying she wants the ability to look not only by department, but also by the fiscal year, so she knows what's immediately upcoming. And then I know this is not all that what we're saying. Rob, what do you say?
I was looking at running out of time, but I was thinking more on a grander level, not as much micro. And to me, I still don't have a good sense of what the town's assets are and which ones are the highest maintenance and are must do sort of things. And so without that information, I was just sort of stymied about, well, do I want to be grand and have chapters of the town plan or what's required? I didn't get there.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. So you're sort of echoing a little bit of what Marcia, well, sort of what we're all saying. We need to have an understanding of the assets. And I think, quite frankly, a representation of the material could go a long way in having us understand that. In other words, it's a huge packet, right? The supporting documentation is like 190 pages. There's like invoices or estimates that are attached to like 2-sentence justifications. I think there's a way with a little bit of tech, like a Trello board or otherwise, for us to like lift that out of there and then do some sorting. So I think with this conversation, I have some directive, or I have some information for how to get this into a presentation and then scheduling out of the conversation. So I want to move, so go ahead, Marcia, and then I want to move on to the capital budgeting part of it to then talk a little bit about the SWOT analysis. And I do want to adjourn probably by 10. Go ahead, Marcia.
Just a quick question. One of the things that the Bernie Sanders thing brought up was for disaster planning. Do we have all of our documents in the land records and stuff? Are they digitized yet so that lawyers and people can use that material if the building is closed? Because I think that's important and should be, a priority.
So I will say that there's always there's an allocation to a designated fund for digitization efforts. But that also echoes a little bit of what Mary was saying. Herb, do you want to sort of answer Marcia's question directly, if you can?
So some records definitely are digitized that are up on what's called the COT system, which if you've done title search, you know what that is. But a lot of the physical land records, no, they're not digitized. I know that as Bonnie will redo a book and all that, they get digitized. And you're hitting home on an issue that John Pepper raised a couple years ago, where why he's basically saying if we're spending money to go through and just rehab the books, we should actually be going through and digitizing all of the books so that, as you say, there's a fire, a flood, whatever, that we have things at least digitally, but also for ease of access, that you should be able to do a title search without necessarily having to come to Tracy Hall. The last year has been a great example where paralegals have had a tough time because you have to set up a specific appointment with Bonnie, and it was limited from that standpoint. So Bonnie would try to help out in advance to expedite the need for someone to come in or minimize that time frame. But yeah, that's to me is that's one of those areas that it's not a deficiency, but definitely an area that needs focus for the future. Absolutely.
The only thing I would add to this conversation is I would like some kind of I would like to support the town manager in some kind of audit or some kind of request for services to the extent that we have or don't have funds for really assessing our human resources at the same time that we're trying to think about our assets. We don't want to think about our employees as, assets. Well, no, we do want to think about our employees as assets, and we do want to understand if there's any sort of opportunities or pain points in the management of their departments. And it also could be part of an envisioning exercise. I see lots of potential for the expansion of a rec department, but it would have to come with an understanding that there are also revenue opportunities to support the expansion of that staffing, right? So I think, at the same time that we're talking about assets in terms of stuff, right? Things that have $1,000 value, we also should be thinking, it doesn't really matter if you can have all the culverts in the world, but if you don't have, staff to install those culverts, and also staff that are, compensated, and all of these issues that come up when we talk about HR. So, so I think that lingers for me too, thinking about opportunities and threats in terms of the gaps and gaps in our staffing. And that relates to a visioning process that we were sort of alluding to when people were talking about our police department. So, which is just so that's that kind of relates to capital. So I'm gonna say that I think I have enough information. I want to encourage people to do whatever kind of exercises they do to think about prioritization, to provide intel and information. And then I think I have some ideas on how to bring this together in a document and in a plan. And then I think, Rob, if you could do a SWOT, and I'll do it. I listed some goals, but I'll do a SWOT analysis, and we'll think about that as for our next meeting too. But I think what I'm going to have next meeting for April 28th is a plan for a proposal for discussing capital based on the things that I had just heard from you. But that's all I got as a way to move on. And that will be informed by a conversation with Herb. I think he had provided a lot of information in those draft capital items. I think people want different ways to sort and discuss it.
Can I just add one other point, Roger?
Go ahead, please.
Herb, in our capital plan, some of the things were, especially for fiscal year 22, some of the requests or some of what was presented in the capital plan was, the cost was broken out in designated fund appropriations over the course of X number of years. In others, it wasn't. And it was just a frank, flat out, spend this money this year or allocate this money this year. And I'm wondering why. And if it can be
uniform.
Yeah, because if it's a capital budget, item, should it not be planned for over the course of X number of years and not just a flat out outlay of those funds for that given year?
So in this level of complexity, but not trying to make it complex.
Sorry, and Roger, if you want to defer this question until the next meeting, that's fine with me, but
The idea was essentially rooted in the needs of the department and identifying those. Obviously, they put it in their order of priority, which is, spaced over a 6-year period of time. We tried to dovetail known designated fund amounts for respective to different things. So if there was an available, for instance, the Route 132 box culvert, the town you guys have already approved the use of the bridge designated fund to do that repair work. We're hoping, because of a couple of the delays that we ran into, we're hoping that we can get a structures grant to do that, which would not totally, take up all that money. But so there is that particular project that is 100% outlay out of the designated fund because that's what you guys approved. In general, if there are other things in the future, knowing that bridge fund is going to go away if we do that, for other bridge projects in the future, we're hoping that we can get some grant funding, but we also have to rebuild up and appropriate new designated funds to go into that bridge fund for, say, something down the road. So there was intentional.
Yeah, I can understand the high ticket and the high cost items. What I can't understand is the request for the DPW shed, say, for instance, or the request for the mower from DPW, or the request for the gator. Those were all allocated lump sum, if I recall correctly.
Yep.
So that is what.
So that's where, separating them out rather than thinking about them as projects, think about them as assets. Because I think what I'm hearing from this conversation is thinking more about anything that's over $1,000 as an asset, and we want an accounting of it. So I think sometimes there's a tendency of department heads to say, to maybe group them into certain requests, right? Like Larry, for instance, numbered his capital budgeting. He would say capital budget request 6, and it was maybe 2 or 3 things. But that level of detail we could get into now that we know that we want to build more of an asset inventory along the way. Go ahead, Mary.
I just would like clarification at some point, doesn't have to be tonight, but just the merits of leasing versus owning. I think that came up with, and also just the way the lease payments are expressed, so much per year for 5 years. I'd rather, if it has to be that, just see the amount carried through year to year. But also, I don't know if it's a better deal. I mean, is it just a result of just inadequate designated fund levels, so that you're forced into a lease? I just like a little more kind of clarification on that at some point.
And what I would offer, Mary, is that leasing, designated funds, bonding, these are all forms of financing, right? Which is we're perhaps not the group to necessarily decide best forms of financing for our capital budget. We might be better suited to define the capital budget with our town manager, and then the issue of when do you lease, when do you bond for debt, right? When do you ask the voters for something could be subject to a finance committee, quite frankly.
I don't actually agree with that as far as leasing a vehicle, because, the value is just expressed through the lease payments rather than through the purchase price that's divided into years. It's the same thing. It's still money. And it's, a lease is over a certain amount of years that you're going to use the vehicle. So I actually don't think that that's divorced from the process at all.
Generally, the leasing versus the ownership is a function of how long you intend on holding on to the capital item. So in general, the life cycle cost of say a vehicle is the people that manufacture and sell the things have it down to a science that essentially it's the same cost to you. The net is what value you own of the capital project at the end of its useful life. So if you do ownership and you plan on turning it over at the end of the useful life, it seems to be more beneficial to do ownership because you have some trade-in value. If you
Right.
just do a lease, you're basically saying, I'm willing to pay a little bit more, but I have it's limited in terms of what, say mileage or the terms of the particular lease. So you have to factor in the life cycle cost and what your decision is in terms of hanging on to that piece of equipment. For instance, in Norwich, it seems to be ownership is better because we hang on to equipment for a long period of time. So we want to have, so there's a little value that goes into it. But there's different perspectives on that, and I'll try to weed out some more of that for you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think what we really need to do to move forward is I think I have some intel. I think I need to put something before you colleagues, my comrades here, and then you'll sort of build on it, because I really want next week to really have a work product for how are we going to work through all of these items before August. And so quite frankly, a schedule where it says like we have 2 meetings to talk a little bit about methodology while also hearing about while also getting the asset inventory would be more valuable than how we're talking about it now, right? So I'll say that. And then go ahead.
So I am trying to work on the updated, say, inventory asset list from that standpoint. So I'm trying to work on that so that you will have that at least in time for your next meeting. I'm trying to figure out how I can get it all together in time for the packet. I might not be able to do it for the regular packet, but either a revised packet or at least get it to you that particular time frame. So I'm trying to get that updated. And then the other thing, which I think I mentioned to you, is that I'm trying to put together another document. I'm only partway through it, which is to basically take each of the items that's in the capital budget and program, and then it's not intended to regurgitate what you already have, but you would see the same items, but that would be sort of like questions to ask of the board or for your consideration. So I'll pick on police cruisers, and that is, I think that where would like to head the town in is to say that you're going to have a regular replacement schedule for your cruisers. So I'm suggesting, is it fair to assume that a cruiser replacement should be every 4 to 6 years? If you guys endorse that, then I know what that helps in planning for the capital budget and program, and also for planning for designated funds leading up to that sort of things. I mean, that's just one example. And so I'm trying to put that together for each of the projects, which hopefully will help to understand. And I think it plays right into, say, what Claudette is trying to do, and that is to establish priorities of the particular projects balanced on what we have and the limitations of the funding. So I think it's going to help dovetail with that kind of discussion.
It'll help with scheduling, certainly. Right. Go ahead, Claudette, you had your hand up.
No, I didn't really. I was going to say, the police cruisers is the perfect example that if we go electric, we have I don't believe there's data on life expectancy of an electric vehicle.
Right.
So, or what's the life expectancy of a hybrid police vehicle? I don't believe there's data on that. There may be, I don't know.
But that would not change
the cycle of the regular gasoline guzzlers was because of the idling time. Well, the idling time is completely different with hybrids and electrics.
So I think like life cycle. So that's when you talk about an asset inventory, you also have to determine the life cycle costs of a vehicle, and so like that conversation may be different for that. So okay, this is instructive.
But anyway, that was an aside.
No, thank you.
I think everything has a life cycle. It's not just vehicles. Roads.
Correct, but my point was that specifically with the electric and the hybrids, we don't have the data that tells you what the life cycle is.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
And so there might be times where you make a value-based decision, but you need to be very deliberate about when you're doing that. So I hear your point very much. So Okay, so I have some ideas. I would like to move on from this, and then if people feel like they didn't get what they expected out of this agenda item, you might not be alone. So please feel free to touch base with me, and we will continue to work on this. But I think next week is, I really want like a work plan for at least for capital through August, and that will be helpful. Okay, I would like to table the next 2 agenda items. Are there any thoughts on that?
I agree. Unless,
Herb,
unless the local hazard or the.
I was going to ask Herb, do I have to adopt LEMP tonight?
You gotta get the LMP adopted.
Okay, so
I'll make a motion.
please.
I
So,
move-
so hold on 1 second. I'm so sorry. So by consensus, we are tabling agenda item number 9, and then we have moved on to agenda item 10. So go ahead, Claudette.
I move to adopt the local emergency management plan and the Vermont National Incident Management System, and to authorize the town manager and a select board member to sign the form attesting to the adoption of said plan and system.
Is there a second?
I second.
Seconded by Mary. Thank you. Any discussion?
Just that Claudette stated it correctly, select board member, but on the motion sheet it says manager. So just to, catch that.
It should be the chair. It should be the chair.
Oh, select board chair.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, so I'll amend that to say that to authorize the town manager and the select board chair to sign the form attesting to the adoption of said plan and system.
Thank you. Any discussion? I think
did we do a terrific job?
Yes, I think the lack of discussion indicates a great job on the LEMP.
And it was most recently adopted. I mean,
Right.
it was less than a year ago, I believe.
You have to adopt it annually. You do a basic update and then you adopt it. So that's why I'm pushing it on you.
Okay.
It seemed very thorough. You were extremely thorough. So
yes. So I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Raise your hand. Okay, great. Unanimous. Okay. So respectfully, is there a motion to adjourn?
I motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Marcia. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
Did I do a John Langus and abstain?
Well, is there any discussion? No. Okay. All in favor? Okay, excellent. Well, thanks to all. We are done.
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good night.
Good night.